Crane Weather, Dave Calbreth Sports. This is Channel 10 News.
Good evening, I'm Kim Alvarado. We have two top stories tonight. The first one, Easter 1993. The Delaware Valley was alive with the sounds of music. Easter services happened all over the Delaware Valley as Christians celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Churches were packed with the faithful. The second top story, we go across the country to L.A. This is how these people spent their Easter in L.A. area, packing guns and ammo to arm themselves against violence. Residents are afraid what might happen after a verdict is reached in the trial of 4 L.A. police officers. And it's that trial that has the country's second largest city on pins and needles tonight. The jury has finished deliberating for the night. They'll start again tomorrow. Here are the headlines. The judge refused a jury request for the transcripts of testimony by one key witness, California Highway Trooper Melanie Singer. The judge told the jurors they must rely on their own memories of testimony in trying to reach a decision. A poll published by the Sunday Los Angeles Times says 33% believe a repeat of last spring's deadly riots was inevitable if the jurors acquit the 4 men. And Police Chief Willie Williams has added more police officers to patrol the streets. And here's the jury arriving to the courthouse earlier today. They arrived around 3:30 our time to restart their deliberations. They attended Easter services this morning. Security measures are being taken seriously in Los Angeles in case the verdict comes back not guilty and sparks violence like last year's verdict. California Governor Pete Wilson says the National Guard will be ready, but he doesn't think they'll be needed.
We have set 700 tomorrow morning as the time that they will actually be in the armory. And if I am correct, and I hope I am, they will stay in the armories. Won't have to actually get out on the streets. I think that the people of Los Angeles all over the city have expressed a common view. They do not see violence, whatever the verdict is, as contributing anything to the improvement of the situation.
I had started stockpiling explosives and different devices so that they could build their own explosives. So clearly that may have added to this fire spreading so quickly.
If I could ask our engineers to switch to the camera that we refer to as farm cam, if that's possible, so we can see if the north side of this building has caught fire yet, if that's a possibility. Can we change shots on that now, or we want to stay with this shot? Well, it's bound to have spread. It looks like the whole building is now involved, Bonnie. And this brings up the points that Bob Ricks made in the news conference regarding the structure of the building. Not thought to be structurally sound, and that's proving to be the case here as this fire just completely roars through this building.
Mike, on the phone right now we have David Jewell, whose ex-wife is in the compound. Mr. Jewell's daughter recently left the compound as well. Mr. Jewell, what are your thoughts now as you see this?
I was certainly not prepared for this when I came on the phone to do an interview with CNN. I'm sitting here watching, listening over the telephone and watching the pictures on television, and I'm very, very glad that my daughter is not at home seeing this right now.
Your daughter had a number of stories to report about her training.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, she was taught to commit suicide, actually, by Vernon Howell, now known as David Koresh, and other members of the compound. They were taught very specifically methods that were better than others. For instance, putting the gun inside your mouth as opposed to beside your head, because there was a chance you might survive if you took a shot in the side of the head.
You have spoken with David Koresh, I believe, for 20 minutes on a phone call, and
yes, on at least one occasion.
What kind of impression did he leave with you? I understand that you could sense the power that he has over people, and do you think that power is being used against them now to remain inside?
I believe that those who are inside, as I heard someone else say a few minutes ago, these are not bad people. That may be true. I believe that they were simply terminally misled. They were put on a course from which there was no reversing. And as I'm seeing now, the roofs caving in on the buildings, I'm inclined to think that, particularly with Bob Rick's statements this morning, that the tear gas that was being used was a non-pyrotechnic type. My understanding of that would mean that it's a non-flammable type of tear gas. That probably what we're seeing is basically, you might call it the pushing of a self-destruct button. The way that I saw this fire develop, I'm inclined to think that it was designed.
Mr. Jewell, thank you very much for talking with us. Also on the phone with us is Belinda Gannum. You have a child inside the compound right now. Your thoughts as you're watching this? Mrs. Gannum, are you with us? Well, as you can see, the parts of the building have collapsed. The fire has indeed engulfed the vast majority of this compound that has been
Bonnie,
the site.
the entire roof is gone.
The entire roof is gone. Mike, what else can you tell us? Any sign of firefighting equipment? I know.
No, none whatsoever. And there's our shot from, you'll remember, Bonnie, what we refer to as farm cam. That's looking from the north side into the compound. Apparently the north side is not involved yet, but it appears the rest of the compound is filled with that orange fire and acrid black smoke.
Also, within the past 10 days, past week, federal authorities surrounded the compound, very close to the compound, with razor-sharp concertina wire to prevent people from running out. That may, in this case, prove to be hazardous.
Still no sign of anyone coming out, Bonnie.
Mike, at this point, the latest figures we have is that there are 95 people inside. Of them, 17 below the age of 10, a total of 25 below the age of 18. Now, with us on the phone is a member of the Branch Davidians speaking from prison. Go ahead.
Is this Brad Branch?
Yes.
Mr. Branch, what have you heard about what has happened, and was this something that was predicted by David? Is this a plan?
This is a systematic character assassination by the FBI to eliminate all of the crime scene. Now they're finishing off the job right now. They're destroying the crime scene. America, this is the biggest lie that's ever been put before the American public ever. Bill Clinton wants to use a scapegoat like the Attorney General. You know, I don't buy it.
Mr. Branch, was there no plan? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Branch, for joining us. Now, as you
Bonnie,
can see... Yes, Dave. Yes,
Bonnie,
let
me interrupt you just for a second. Off to the right side of the screen, you can see 3 or 4 people. Apparently, it looks like federal agents out there beside the building. Now, whether they have any of the cultists with them, it's hard to tell from this vantage point, but it appears there is some movement, some people outside of the burning portion of the compound.
You're right, and they are dressed in the black SWAT outfits that are used by the FBI officials. We now have a closer shot of it. It is very difficult to see what they are doing.
And once again, let's point out that the pictures are shaky because it is very, very windy, and
right.
We have to remain on a tight shot to get these pictures as close as we can. And the wind just plays havoc with our camera position.
Now, Mike, on the phone with us is R.G. Wilson of the Waco Fire Department. Sir, do you have fire trucks on the way to the scene now?
Yes, we do. We have 2 units that were requested by the FBI probably about 5 minutes ago or 6, and they're en route now.
Were you given any type of heads up or any type of warning that something like this might happen? Were you on standby at all?
No, not today. We have been in the past, but we weren't today of any type. We had been in contact with the FBI and ATF, and they were to follow normal procedures and use 911 to get a hold of us.
Have you been seeing pictures of the compound? And if so, at what point can you still make a difference in terms of putting out this fire and saving any of the building? Well,
the biggest problem there is there's no municipal water supply there. The compound is out in the country. They use wells. Our equipment hooks up to fire plugs, and just like they do in all the municipalities around, our engines do not have the capability to draft water. Therefore, we have contacted a satellite community, Bell Mead, and they're sending 1 or 2 units that do have the capability to draft water out of stock tanks, swimming pools, whatever the case may be. But right now, there's no difference. There's no way you can do anything with that building right now.
Well, and the building right now is about 7-8 miles outside of Waco.
Right.
When do you think your units will get on the scene?
They'll probably have about a 8 to 10 minute to 12 minute ETA.
From now, or from 2 minutes ago when you sent them off?
Yeah, probably from about 3 minutes ago. So they're probably still, probably at least a good 10 or 12 minutes away.
Mike Capps, are you able to see any more people outside?
Not from this vantage point, Bonnie. All we can see is some Chinook helicopters. If we could pan back over toward the fire, or perhaps cut to a shot over there. Could we do that, please? Thank you. From this vantage point, it'll probably be hard, Bonnie, to spot anyone coming out. Those Chinook helicopters will be used as medevac equipment, as we're told. This fire is completely out of control, and as the chief said, obviously they won't be able to do much except perhaps put out some smoldering embers there, it appears, and still no indication, no sign that anybody is coming out.
Mr. Wilson, are you still with us? Okay, I understand he's not. Still no word on whether or not any additional ambulances have been sent into the scene. Clearly, federal officials from the start were always prepared to evacuate a small number of wounded to hospitals in Waco. There's also the Fort Hood facility where we were told David Koresh and some of his others would also be taken. However, this situation has certainly changed that. Sonia, I understand you have a guest with you.
Yes, thank you, Bonnie. We're going to go now to Robert Klotz, who used to be in special operations for the D.C. Police. He ran the helicopter squad, the bomb squad, and the presidential security unit. Now, Mr. Klotz, we are all watching this. We heard that this is a non-lethal form of tear gas, and the big question at the moment is, did the gas ignite this fire, or is there something else that's responsible for it?
Well, I can't say with certainty that it did not. There are certain types of tear gas that when the methodology that you use can ignite a spark or create a fire.
Now, we know this is CS gas and that
That's
it was
correct.
administered through an M5 dispenser. Tell us what that means and how that might add to the information.
Okay, an M5 dispenser is merely a larger vehicle for emitting the gas. It's usually run by a gas motor or something of that type. If that was on a tank and it was being
Let me
used...
mention to you, Mr. Klotz, if you were watching, we just saw an explosion that came from one side of this building, so obviously there are things that are igniting even as we speak.
Keep in mind there's heavy munitions and heavy arms in there.
Right,
Right, Mike, thank you.
I understand that part of that building had a lot of munitions in it, and that may be what you have just been looking at. The rapidity in which that fire took hold and the rapidity in which it spread seems to indicate to me that there had to be some kind of fluid or liquid in there. I've been at places where through the delivery of tear gas a fire has broken out. I've never seen one spread as rapidly as that, engulf as many buildings and as quickly as that particular one did.
Mr. Klotz, could I ask you a question here?
Sure.
Insert this here. Bob Ricks, the FBI special agent in charge in the news conference, said that this was non-pyrotechnic CS gas.
Okay, that means...
Can you explain what that means?
All right, that means that when it's introduced, there should be no spark or nothing that could create a fire. It's merely propelled through a tube in large amounts. Some of the other methods, if you use what they call a baseball grenade or a gas gun, where there's actually a spark created, but in a non-pyrotechnic type of situation, there is no spark, so there should be no chance for fire.
Mr. Klotz, let me ask you, as you look at all these pictures, I mean, could anyone survive this if they were anywhere in the perimeter of the scene that we are seeing right now?
Well, if there are underground bunkers, etc., as I have heard, depending on what type of air system they have, if it's an independent air system, the possibility is that somebody could exist. If they're in any of those structures, smoke inhalation would have taken care of the situation quite some time ago.
What about the heat, Mr. Kloss? I mean, how far down and to what temperature would heat go in terms of people being in bunkers?
Okay, you got to understand that I'm an ex-policeman, not an ex-fireman, so I'm not totally versed in that, but from what I understand, and the reason they tell people to get low, etc., during a fire and crawl is that heat tends to rise and the smoke doesn't go down too low. So it would seem to me if they were in a bunker which had a separate ventilation system, their chances would be better. I don't know what they have there.
Let me ask you about gas masks. We understand that they have gas masks available. How long does a gas mask last?
Gas mask is merely filters out the tear gas. It doesn't contain any self-contained oxygen that would help somebody if the problem was lack of oxygen. The only thing a gas mask has is a filter to filter out the tear gas or whatever, or the smoke.
Thank you for that. Let's go back to near Waco and to CNN correspondent Mike Capps. Mike?
Sonia, there's a couple of points to make here. Keep in mind, we're a mile and a half away from this fire, almost 2 miles really, with an 800 millimeter lens. Smoke is billowing 150, 200 feet into the air. And also keep in mind, this is an area the size of a city block that's on fire. We are not talking about a small fire here. This is a big blaze and a hot blaze, and we've, as you pointed out a few moments ago, we've seen an explosion. So this is obviously a very dangerous situation.
Mike, as you said, that explosion came from the area in the compound where FBI officials suspected the weapons and the explosives were being held. Now, it's very clear from talking with the fire chief and also from sources within the FBI that they were not expecting this. As we had reported earlier, the scenario called for tear gas to be inserted using various tracked vehicles. And in the best case scenario was that everyone would come out within 15 minutes. The worst case scenario, the worst thing they imagined in terms of planning this operation was that it would take 2 hours for the people to come out. So clearly this was not part of the plan. They did not have fire trucks standing by. They were not expecting an explosion of this magnitude and a fire of this magnitude. And so certainly, you know, it must be, at this point, very difficult to figure out what to do next.
Plus, we're into the 7th hour of this instead of the 2nd hour.
Absolutely.
It seems like the smoke is not nowhere near as thick as it was. However, the fire is still rolling. Mentioned a moment ago about the structural unsoundness of these buildings, and it's pretty obvious. Both while watching the M60 vehicle back in and out, and then seeing how the fire just raced through here, and let's give the wind a little bit of blame here, because it is extremely windy, as we've pointed out repeatedly here all day long, and that just made the situation even that much worse.
Now, Mike, this has been going on, as you said, about 6.5 hours ago. For the moment now, though, some local cable operators will be cutting away for a commercial message at this time, but CNN live coverage of developments in Waco continues. As you can see, a large part of the compound, the Branch Davidians complex, known to them as Mount Carmel, is in flames. We have seen a number of explosions. The flag, however, continues to fly. Tactical officials with the FBI did tell me that one reason they never knocked down the flagpole was that it would provide information to sharpshooters. It could provide the strength of the wind and the direction of the wind should sharpshooters ever be called upon. So that is one reason why that flagpole has not been knocked down. Mike, are any of the 3rd or 4th level floors of the compound, are they still standing?
It doesn't appear to be. None of them appear to be, Bonnie. It's I'm seeing the same picture you are, a very wide shot, and from my vantage point, it appears that everything that was above the 2nd level is gone, except the water tower appears to be still standing. And let's keep in mind one other thing. We had mentioned some underground tunnels and the possibility of a bunker. Bob Ricks in the news conference said he believed
Mike,
that was nothing more than a crawl space. Yes, I'm
Mike,
sorry.
for those viewers rejoining us following a local commercial break, CNN is bringing you live coverage of developments in Waco, Texas. We also remind you that for a current update of the day's news, you can tune to Headline News. Now, let's return to CNN's live coverage of developments in Waco. Mike, can you give us an update?
Yes. What you're seeing is the Branch Davidian compound that's been under siege for the past 51 days. It is engulfed in flames. What happened was about 6 o'clock this morning, local time, the federal agents in an armored vehicle began pumping tear gas. The flag has just fallen there along the branch in front of the Branch Davidian compound. Federal agents began poking holes in the side of the building and pumping tear gas in there. They relented for a while, and but steadily continued to pump tear gas. About 50 minutes ago, we watched this M60 armored vehicle move in and out of what appeared to be the front portion of the south portion of the building, and insert more tear gas. And still more tear gas, and then we saw flames break out, and wind blew and blew and blew, and the flames steadily spread throughout the compound. And this has taken us what we've been like this in flames for the better part of an hour now.
Mike, as you mentioned, shortly before federal officials began using the tracked vehicles to poke holes into the walls and to insert the tear gas. According to Special Agent in Charge Bob Ricks, they did broadcast over the loudspeaker system a message to those people inside, the 95 people, according to Koresh, and they said, quote, "This is not an assault, do not fire. We're introducing a non-lethal tear gas. Exit the compound now and you will not be harmed. Come out and you will be provided medical attention." Of course, no one took them up on the offer, and at this point there's no word on where the 95 people, that includes some 25 people under the age of 18, where they are now, and if indeed they're in some sort of underground bunker or not.
And Bonnie, we need to point out again, the only vision of humanity we've seen outside this place has been what appeared to be 3 or 4 men dressed in black, apparently a SWAT team, FBI men outside, and that's probably been 25 minutes ago now.
As you can see on the screen now, to the left of the tracked vehicle, you can see some of the FBI agents. There are some late reports right now that one person did exit the compound with his hands up and that he has been taken into custody. But as of now, that is only one of 95 people, 94 people now. On the screen, once again, you can see one of the federal agents standing on the tracked vehicle quite close to that compound in the burning building.
Have not seen any more movement aside from that, Bonnie. You pointed out, I believe it was in the lower right-hand portion of the screen where you saw that FBI agent a moment ago.
Yes, it was. David Koresh, throughout this entire siege, has told federal authorities, and they have passed on to us, that he would not come out until he had a message from God. This was, of course, what delayed the entire process on the 3rd day of the siege, when Koresh had promised to come out after the playing of a 58-minute message. Federal officials were at the ready. They had the hospital prepared. They were going to take in the 3 or 4 wounded members of the cult, Koresh included, but then nothing happened. David Koresh explained he had been told by God to wait, and that he would not come out until God told him to come out.
Bonnie, we are seeing the first Waco fire truck go past us even as we speak. Now this has been some 45 minutes after the fire broke out. The fire chief, led in by a Department of Public Safety trooper, and here comes the first pumper truck from the Waco Fire Department. 2 pumper trucks actually, and they'll be coming past they're coming past the compound, into the compound right now. You can see them entering But as the fire chief told us a few moments ago, there's not a whole lot his men can do, his firefighters can do at this juncture.
There is no, the compound is not hooked up to the city water supply, and indeed the only water available comes from a lake that is on the property, the 77-acre ranch. The pump, however, has been disabled. Now, with us now is CNN's Flip Spiceland, who can give us an idea of how weather would play a role in a fire like this. Flip?
Well, Bonnie, we just, here at the CNN Weather Center, just checked our computer and found that it is a very, very windy area, but you can look at the video and tell that. Wind speeds are from the south at about 17 miles an hour currently, but that is a sustained wind. The winds have actually been picking up throughout the morning hours, and we have been seeing wind gusts near 30 miles an hour all morning long. And again, indications are that it's actually getting windier rather than calming down. So we expect wind speeds of up to 30 miles an hour throughout much of the afternoon. Bonnie?
Thanks, Flip. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, Special Agent Bob Ricks did say, quote, "We own the compound." And one thing that we can tell you now is that agents, federal agents indeed, were constantly in position within 50 feet of the compound, and that federal officials were also employing a very high-tech robot of sorts that had 7 cameras and was able to peek in windows 2 or 3 stories high by elevating a pole with the cameras inside. We know from our sources that the Branch Davidians were aware of the robot, but were not sure of its capabilities and therefore did not attack it in any way. Mike, what's the latest? Have you been able to see the fire trucks get to work?
Yes, Bonnie. We have a picture of the fire trucks entering the area where the FBI agents have been, and it's still going to take them a couple of minutes to get up over to the compound itself to even begin to put what little water they have access to on that fire. If this is like a normal pumper truck, they're probably carrying 350 to 500 gallons of water on board, and that's it. And that's not much to pour on any kind of a fire, let alone one of that magnitude.
On the phone with us right now is Ken Hines, who's a fire protection specialist. Mr. Hines, as you're watching these pictures, what could you come up with? What sort of plan? Is there a plan that fire officials could use now?
Well, I'm sure that the fire department have been in contact with the federal authorities in terms of something like this occurred. As you mentioned, in terms of fire protection and try to extinguish the fire department has to bring their water with them. So in a situation like this, what they would do would be to try to find an external water source in a location that would protect their firefighters if there would be any type of gunfire involved or anything like that, and establish a water supply, what we would call a relay pump, providing water to those fire engines right at the scene to deliver the water. The building's collapsed. The threat to the firefighters right now, I would assume, would be the tense situation in terms of is the scene secure? Is there anybody inside that may do harm not only to law enforcement but also the firefighters?
Well, as you can see in the live pictures, there's virtually very little of the building left, a drastic difference from what we saw just about an hour ago.
Right.
Given the fact that there are also explosives inside, that must also add an entirely new and different element to fighting such a fire.
Well, in a situation like this, the fire department of Waco won't send anybody in. We in the fire service call this strictly a defensive fire. They'll set up their master streams on the top of the fire trucks, much like you saw in Los Angeles a year ago during the riots, and they'll apply large volumes of water to extinguish the fire. They may leave those unmanned, move their firefighters to the opposite side of where the fire is. If there are any projectiles from explosives or ammunition catches inside the building, that would protect those firefighters. Now, the danger to firefighters comes into play when they're trying to drag hose lines or things like that. I would imagine, obviously, they're going to position their equipment upwind and do the best they can. In terms of a fire operation and tactics involved, they'd be there for a great deal of time doing the salvage and overhaul to make sure the building's out. Now, I heard you ask earlier about the bunker, and the law enforcement official was correct that the fire burns up and the heat burns up. But as the building collapses, that would prevent any escape from that bunker, at least on the top of the building.
About the underground bunker, can people survive if they were in that underground bunker underneath what is happening right now?
Well, I don't know that much. I've watched your coverage for the last 45 days, and I don't know the construction or the type of ventilation system they have. No one can survive smoke products if they're exposed to them unless they have what we call self-contained breathing apparatus, or the air bottles that the firefighters wear on their back. If there's some type of filtration system, or it has an airtight system that draws air, maybe from another location rather than around the fire, I would imagine they could survive. But nobody can survive the products of fire or smoke.
Mr. Hines, please stand by for just a moment. I'd like to ask you some more questions, but first, Cheryl Atkinson is with us with some late-breaking news.
Well, Bonnie, this report, the White House says that according to its Justice Department, the cult members apparently set that fire that is consuming the compound near Waco, Texas. Of course, there was no way to know for certain how that fire started, the speculation that it had come from inside, and now the White House is quoting its Justice Department people as saying the cult members did set that fire. Bonnie?
Mr. Hines, just judging by how quickly it spread, was it your belief as well that this was not just a fire that spread in its natural progression, but was indeed perhaps aided?
Well, the fire folks in Waco, or the county around Waco, could provide you more information as to the construction of the building, but it appeared to be ordinary wood construction, and as I saw the fire unfold, I don't know whether there was some type of an accelerant or they set the building to burn. That would be something that could be determined by the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms folks, along with the state agency down there, but it definitely was burning with a great deal of ferocity.
At this point, what kind of effect could 2 fire trucks have on this? I mean, it appears that there is virtually no building left. What steps would they take now to try to perhaps go into the bunkers?
Well, I would imagine that the strategy that the fire folks there would use, and not to put words in their mouth, I don't like to second guess anybody, but that they would start there on the upwind side and work their way back, extinguishing the fire under protection of the law enforcement folks. I can't imagine them pulling any hand lines off or getting into any type of hand line advancement until the area has been secured. That's just not good tactics for firefighters and until the scene's secured.
Mike Capps, are you on with us?
Yes, I am, Bonnie.
Mr. Hines, if you will stay with us, I'll just see if we can get an update from Mike Capps, who is in Waco on the scene.
Okay, that's fine. I also have a question for him before we go. It appears that there was a lot of heavy black smoke, and you mentioned an accelerant. If, in fact, the cult members did start this fire, what are you talking about in terms of an accelerant?
Well, as you saw the fire burn, it was very heavy black smoke. Now, that's pretty common for any type of a structure fire, because what that is, those are the products that your couches, your chairs, your nylon-based products will give off heavy black smoke. That's pretty common. Anything that's a petroleum-based fire will give off heavy black smoke also. We know whether it's diesel fuel burning or gasoline or anything like that. I don't know what the products were inside the building. I didn't see any explosions. I didn't see any type of what would give the indication of like rocket shells or anything like that exploding. So
since we've been chatting, we did have, or before you and I started chatting, there was an explosion right before the firefighters went in there. Mm-hmm. And they are in there now. We've seen the fire trucks come up and in there, so they must feel reasonably secure that the scene itself is secure.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, as I mentioned before, I'm sure that the fire department had an operational plan worked out with the federal authorities and the state authorities in the event something like this would occur. And I can see the firefighters here on the screen in front of me that they're advancing some hand lines to the area where they has to be secure.
Mm-hmm. How much manpower are you talking about to operate 2 trucks like that? That's not a very big manpower commitment.
Well, normally complement would be 3 to 4 persons per truck. Looks like a chief's car rolled in, which probably contained maybe 2 or 3 firefighters or command officers to interface and liaison with the federal authorities. And I'm sure that the fire department also has someone there at the federal command post to try to control what they do. You can see the firefighter there in front of you has the self-contained breathing apparatus on and is working along the proper safety lines to do what he needs to do.
It's an amazing scene because 2 hours ago there were buildings there, and right. Now there are none.
Right.
And it's
well, once again, water supply is key, and being familiar with the Waco area, but not specifically where this is, I don't know where your nearest water supply is, but in order to establish this and control the fire department has to bring the water with them, as you mentioned, and those engines as you mentioned, can contain anywhere from 300, maybe even up to 750 gallons worth of water, which is not near enough water to extinguish even the fire that you see now.
Mike, on the phone with us also right now is Dr. Jeff Bott, who's a burn specialist at the Grady Hospital in Atlanta. Dr. Bott, the potential for loss of life and certainly tremendous burns exists here. What type of facilities, what kind of treatment would be necessary at this point, at least to have on standby?
They'd absolutely need a designated burn unit. Potential problems from a fire of this nature are, very serious. Potential loss of life would be great if, in fact, the victims are, indeed still inside.
Do you know if there is any type of facility like that in the Waco area?
To my knowledge, the best burn center in the Texas area is in Galveston. There's a Shriners, I believe, in Galveston, and they do a fair amount of work there at the University of Texas Health Center.
Would a facility like that, though, be able to handle a large number of people? Are these not small, confined facilities that specialize?
If there are 90 people, it would probably be nearly impossible to handle that many folks. That's a substantial problem that they would have medically. I'm sure Houston may be able to take some, and possibly San Antonio as well.
I would suspect that the agents who are near the building also face a tremendous amount of potential harm, either to smoke inhalation or to burns. What could you tell us about that kind of situation?
Well, the potential victims from a smoke inhalation would not need a specified burn unit. The injuries from smoke inhalation can mainly be managed in a different type of unit than a specialized burn care unit. But the fire victims themselves, they would, the folks that have been burned obviously need to go to a specialized burn care center.
Is there anything that can be done immediately if indeed more people come out of the compound? Is there any treatment that should be given to them immediately, something that could forestall further injury?
Well, in the immediate period on the compound grounds, probably the best thing they could do would be to, establish, once they've put the fires out, would be establish some intravenous fluids and give the patients oxygen, and then get them to the nearest facility. That's about all you can do. As long as the patients have adequate oxygen and IV fluids, they should be fine for a length of time to enable them to get to a facility.
Dr. Bott, thank you very much for joining us. Mike Capps on the scene in Waco. We've seen a lot of helicopter activity. Any visible evidence, any evidence that indeed anyone is being evacuated?
None that I've seen, Bonnie, and just to further clarify a point here, probably the closest burn center to Waco would be Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, and they offer probably quicker care than they could receive in Galveston. Galveston being a little further, but all great facilities. We're just seeing helicopters here. It looks like they're pouring something from the helicopter, or perhaps they're just looking over the area and seeing if there's any indication of life anywhere. It's hard to tell from this vantage point, but these helicopters have been up circling probably the last 5-6 minutes.
All right, right now CNN's Wolf Blitzer is at the White House with the latest from Washington. Wolf, what can you tell us?
Well, over here at the White House, we just had a briefing, and White House officials are saying, quoting the Justice Department, that they believe the fire was set inside, that it was not set from the outside. White House officials say they don't have any other additional specific information on the cause of the fire, but the president, of course, is closely monitoring the situation. White House Communications Director George Stephanopoulos says the president was informed of the operational plan on Sunday when he spoke by telephone with the Attorney General Janet Reno. She informed the president that the FBI did have a plan in mind. She provided in about a 15-minute conversation the details of the plan, most of the details. The president, according to Stephanopoulos, did not have any objections, and of course, as a result, the plan was authorized and went forward. The president, of course, because this is the responsibility of his administration, the Justice Department, which oversees the FBI, the president, of course, takes full responsibility for whatever is unfolding in Waco right now. But again, the news from the White House is that the Justice Department, which oversees the FBI, has informed the White House that the fire was set inside. And of course, we will be monitoring that situation as it unfolds over here at the White House. Bonnie?
Well, FBI agents told us early on that for the first 10 days their hands were tied because there was no attorney general. Have you heard the same thing? And if indeed you have, is this an indication then that Janet Reno has also agreed to go along with this plan?
Yes, of course. Janet Reno is in charge of the FBI because she's the Attorney General. There is an FBI Director, Judge William Sessions, and of course his plan is the one that was put into place this morning. But Janet Reno clearly authorized it. She then had this telephone conversation with the president on Sunday, and because the president did not object to it, it was automatically authorized. The president could have raised objections, could have raised questions, could have delayed this operation. We do know, though, for several weeks, White House officials, other administration officials were very concerned. They were hoping that this situation in Waco could be resolved peacefully without additional loss of life. One of the great concerns, of course, being the initial loss of life in the unsuccessful ATF raid that took place, as we know, some 50 or so days ago. But there's no doubt that the White House and other agencies here in Washington, the Justice Department, the FBI, Treasury, which oversees the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, all of these officials were losing patience, and they wanted to see this situation resolved. Once this plan was presented to the president and to Janet Reno, it got the blessing and has been put into place this morning.
One thing that we also heard repeatedly from tactical officers on the field was that they had indeed presented numerous tactical plans to Washington, and that the plans were repeatedly turned down. There was some animosity on the part of the tactical agents on the ground, saying that they didn't think that politicians should get involved in this kind of tactical operation. Had you all picked up, did you pick up on this type of animosity at all?
Yes, and that's not all that unusual, given the nature of these kinds of operations. Usually tactical operational personnel on the ground are much more eager to do something, and there's very often a political restraint that comes from Washington. We do know that Secretary of the Treasury, Lloyd Benson, spoke out publicly about 10 days or so ago on the need for patience, on the need for any of these operational plans to be fully coordinated with Washington. He did not want a repeat of the initial operation that resulted in the loss of life. There's also a sense, though, that at least here at the White House officials have consistently denied allegations coming from sources in Waco that the White House was supposedly micromanaging this operation. Officials here at the White House have repeatedly said that the president wanted to be fully informed. He wanted to know everything that was going on, but there was never a desire on the part of the president or any other senior officials at the White House to micromanage this. There was always a desire, though, at the Treasury Department and at the Justice Department to go ahead and micromanage it, and that's apparently what has been going on. But in the end, this latest plan that was put forward to Janet Reno, the Attorney General, was accepted by her. She informed the president, and he certainly gave the green light to go ahead with it.
All right, thank you. Wolf Blitzer at the White House. Cheryl Atkinson joins us now with an update. Cheryl?
Well, Bonnie, as that fire appears to be dying down somewhat since the building is practically leveled, it appears, the information coming from the White House, according to wire service reports, is that 2 people were seen at the cult compound near Waco, starting the fire at opposite ends of the complex. And federal officials have apparently told the White House they believe the 2 people who started the fire at opposite ends of the complex are cult members. And we see a tank going by at the bottom of the screen. So again, looking for clues exactly how that fire started, what was used to make it blow up into such a huge fire as it became. And now back to Bonnie Anderson.
Thank you, Cheryl. Now, some local cable operators will be cutting away for a commercial message at this time. CNN live coverage of the Waco developments continues. For those viewers rejoining us following a local commercial break, CNN is bringing you live coverage of developments in Waco. We also remind you that for a current update of the day's news, you can tune to Headline News. Now let's return to CNN's live continuing coverage of events in Waco, where the compound, the Mount Carmel compound, where David Koresh and his followers has been burned. We understand now that indeed the fire, at least according to federal officials in Washington, was set intentionally. Mike Capps in Waco, what can you tell us? How can you update us?
Bonnie, CNN affiliate WFAA television from Dallas is reporting that 2 people came out of the compound, one with hands up, the other person apparently an agent who went in to get that person. So it's unclear now what the circumstances were, but apparently 2 people did come out at some point. We do not know who the cult member was. Obviously a cult member came out with his or her hands up. That all remains to be seen. That report coming from CNN affiliate WFAA. We're seeing activity. We see the M60 vehicles there alongside the fire trucks as they continue to watch the smoldering ruins of this fire. As the fire burned quickly. It began about 12:08 Central Time, and it took very little time for it to build up to a full-scale blaze and engulf what appeared to be the entire Branch Davidian compound, all the buildings in the Branch Davidian compound. All that is standing appear to be a shell of one of the buildings and perhaps the water tank, and there's the flagpole. The flag itself fell. Bonnie, from your experience, can you spot any other parts of the building that even are remotely familiar?
The only thing that I can see from the video is indeed the water tower, and that we were told was made of some sort of metal. It was dragged up. It was dragged up from the lake. We'd like to welcome everyone who's rejoining us following a local commercial break. We are continuing with our live coverage of events in Waco. Joining us now is Cheryl Atkinson with an update. Cheryl?
Bonnie, to recap for those viewers who may be just tuning into CNN, it is day 51 of the siege near Waco, Texas, and the standoff between the FBI and the Branch Davidian religious cult that now seems to be coming to an explosive and fiery end. Today's dramatic developments began shortly before dawn when the FBI apparently finally ran out of patience. CNN's Mike Capps has been closely following events and joins us now near Waco. Mike, it strikes me that we may never know, depending on the extent of this fire, exactly what happened. If there are bodies inside, as we were led to believe that there may have been from the initial shootout, how those people died, exactly how many munitions were inside. This was a terribly destructive fire.
We may never learn a lot of answers. That's exactly correct. Because obviously of this fire, many questions may go unanswered. Who these people were that died, were the lists that David Koresh gave the federal government, were they correct? We knew 2 names for sure among those who were killed in the shootout. Apparently there were 2 or 3 more besides that. We may never know who those people were. There just are a lot of unanswered questions left, and the crime scene itself is gone for all intents and purposes. It'll be interesting to see if there's anything even remotely remaining that could be used as a crime scene to prosecute anybody who survives this.
Mike Capps, we are getting a report now that according to Washington, there's an official saying that FBI agents were, of course, doing everything possible to rescue the cult members from the compound, but that at least 20 people may have gotten out of this cult compound. We haven't been able to see, by looking through our cameras, people running out or being rescued, but we did see agents going near the compound, and apparently, according to at least one source, at least 20 people may have gotten out of this destructive fire. At the time the fire started, one official said the FBI had no operation underway, but that FBI snipers were able to see 2 people whom the FBI have identified as cult members at opposite ends of the compound starting this fire. It's It's not known exactly why the fire spread so quickly or what arrangements were possibly made by the cult members to make sure the fire would spread quickly.
Let me just say, Cheryl, from my vantage point, our vantage point here at the Satellite City, it's very difficult to see a lot of the goings-on because the brush is high or we're just so far away. So that could easily be the case. There could easily have been 20 people get out of there and then be placed on a bus that, on the other side of this place that we can't see, and them having been taken out. Our cameras are manning the exits to this to the compound, and we continue to monitor that.
Okay, let's go to CNN's Bonnie Anderson, who, of course, spent a lot of time near Waco, Texas, waiting for this to unfold, and she's here with us now in Atlanta.
The fire has been burning now for well over an hour. Let's take a look at some of that earlier video. It started in one corner of the compound where there is a lookout tower. It's also a reception area there, and it was very close to where the weapons cache was believed to have been stored. It spread extremely quickly throughout the compound. At times there were explosions. As you can see now, there are heavy winds blowing the smoke and adding to the spreading of the fire. And it was just a short matter of time before the vast majority of the compound had indeed been engulfed in flames. There are reports now out of Washington that FBI officials believe the fire was intentionally started. With us is Ken Hines on the phone. He is a fire specialist. Mr. Hines, from what you've seen now, the quick spreading of this fire, any doubt in your mind that this was intentionally set?
Well, it's pretty difficult to tell, at least from the information that you've been passing on, that they saw the people setting it. That's a pretty good indicator that someone had it had been predetermined or pre-planned, I guess, or working within some kind of plan inside the cult location there. There's a number of things you can do to have fire spread that fast. They might have poured some type of gasoline or flammable product, diesel fuel, kerosene, anything like that, and preset the building to burn. Open the doors, piled up bedding, and I heard you mention before in terms of the crime scene and processing that, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is an excellent organization.
Excuse me for one quick moment. I do want to point out that we do see some agents, it appears, on the ground there, right next to the Bradley fighting vehicle that's going by now. They're right behind there. It could be as well that there are some cult members with them. We do have information that at least 20 of them have gotten out. Mr. Hines, if you would continue. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
In terms of, as a fire burns, and as you mentioned, there's nothing left, but there's products of combustion, the petroleum products, and they can determine what was used to set the fire and can go back and reconstruct the building to see where the fire started from those eyewitness accounts and how the fire progressed, and come up with a pretty good, accurate picture as to what happened inside there that nobody could see.
Well, to recap, there were 95 people inside the compound, according to David Koresh. This is information that he has provided to federal officials. 35 people have come out, plus 2 others, a total of 7. The other 2 were 2 men who snuck into the compound and were able to get past federal authorities, and they have indeed exited over the past couple of weeks. Now, among the 35 people who have come out of the compound prior to today include among them 21 children and 14 adults. Several of the adults have already been charged, indicted on charges of conspiracy to murder federal agents, murder of federal agents, the possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Some of the other adults have been released to halfway homes. These include some of the elderly members of the Branch Davidian sect. There are also some other members who are being held as material witnesses inside the prison, inside the jail in Waco, Texas. Mike Capps?
Bonnie, a local radio station is reporting, has a reporter set up outside one of the main hospitals here in Waco, and he has seen absolutely no activity. We just saw an ambulance race by into the compound. We have seen none come out. Which indicates to me that if there are people who came out injured, they have not been transported yet. And here we are. We're an hour and about 5 or 10 minutes past the time the fire started.
Now, the scope of the fire was obviously very extensive. And however, there was an underground bunker that we've all been made aware of. How complete it is was unknown. Federal authorities simply said they knew that a bunker existed. There was word that a bus, a full-size school bus, had been buried and was used as a corridor from one part of the underground bunker to the other. Whether the people inside the compound, the 95 people, are indeed inside that bunker is unknown at this point. Whether or not they could survive a fire of that magnitude, were they inside there, is also unknown. Mike, any word now on who might be to blame for something like this? Clearly, this was not anticipated by federal agents on the ground. The sources that I had been talking to and had been giving us information about the tactical elements of a raid like this had envisioned this would be over virtually within 2 hours, that there would be minimal loss of life, that the people would indeed come out with their hands up and surrender. This has surely taken off on a completely different point.
Well, Bonnie,
point,
it struck me.
Go ahead, Mike.
It struck me that during the news conference, Bob Ricks made a strong point about the loyalty and faithfulness that David Koresh's followers had to him and to his cause. And having said that, I think he even used the word fanaticism. And having said that, I think that you and I would both agree that these people would literally follow David Koresh no matter where he went, heaven or hell or wherever. And so all that to say, to place a blame right now, I guess we just have to go with what we're being told by the Justice Department, that this fire was started by cult members, and again, that remains to be seen as time goes by in this investigation.
Mike, one of the points that some members of the cult who are in jail passed on to me was that they believe very strongly that they were playing a very important role in the unfolding of biblical events in our time. That these events in Waco were prophesied in the book of Revelation, and that if they were to surrender to the FBI, they would lose their souls. They truly believed that the FBI were agents of Satan, I was told, and that their job as followers of David Koresh, whom they believed to be Jesus Christ, was to stay inside the compound until they heard from God. And that was a very powerful, powerful message. People inside the jail were saying that in a way they were sorry they could not remain inside the compound, that they were indeed sent out by David Koresh because they felt that their souls would have been in better shape had they remained with David Koresh.
Well, that's the attitudes of those people in jail and their faithfulness to the very end of this has always amazed me, Bonnie, I have to tell you. But be interesting to be able to talk to those people now that this has ended like it has. We had Brad Branch on just for a moment, and you heard what he had to say. A pretty nasty diatribe aimed at the FBI. And it'll be interesting to see how and hear what those people have to say once the events of the day unfold here.
This is Cheryl Atkinson, Mike. To recap something that we had been reporting, the White House, of course, is getting its information from the Justice Department and has told reporters that it feels pretty certain that 2 cult members started this fire. And it said that FBI agents in sniper positions observed these 2 people, believed to be cult members, at opposite ends of the compound starting the fire. Also that 20 people, perhaps, have gotten out of this compound. There were some 95 inside, going by David Koresh's count. And so 20 of them may have been rescued, and hospitals are on standby getting ready to receive patients. Bonnie, earlier the FBI's Bob Ricks had noted that hopefully, he had said, the maternal instincts of the parents inside this compound would kick in when the tear gas started coming in and do something to protect the children, hopefully come out, in his words. But continually, these cult members have defied what others would consider rational behavior.
That's right, Cheryl. One of the main reasons for launching an attack or an assault during morning hours was that they believed the women would be with their children, certainly within arm's reach. The men generally at that hour at daybreak would be beginning their workday in construction, and this is the normal routine which has continued throughout the entire siege, and this is again according to the FBI, that they would continue doing construction work on the property, and that's why there was some concern that the underground bunkers had indeed been beefed up.
How are these people inside the cult, to your knowledge, able to get their outside information in these past few days, or even as this began to unfold? Did they have access to any radios or media that could tell them what was happening as it was going on?
The only access they have had since the second week of the standoff was a battery-powered radio, and federal authorities had been shipping in batteries for it, because authorities wanted to use the press conferences and the media briefings as a way to get a strong message to Koresh. Koresh could tell by the questions that were being asked exactly what the outside world was thinking and the impression of the standoff. So indeed, they've had the battery-powered radio. Earlier on, they also had access to television. They had a satellite dish. But on about the 12th, 13th day of the standoff, the electricity was cut off to the compound and the satellite dish was disabled.
The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, those agents are the ones, of course, involved in the original raid on the compound. Since then, of course, the FBI has come in, and it's the FBI that was responsible for today's raid totally.
That's
with
right.
ATF agents. Were they backing up on site?
The only ATF agents that have been allowed into the command center, from my understanding, and this comes from ranking officers in both agencies, were the top-level special agents in charge. All the other ATF agents have been relegated to perimeter duty, and many of them not getting closer than 2 or 3 miles. The only exception was when a person was released. The FBI would allow the ATF to drive a car in, pick up that person, and then be seen leaving the compound, taking that person to jail.
There are, we are told, some 9 or 10 ambulances standing by at the scene. Hospitals, according to some local radio reports near Waco, have reported no unusual activity, except a spokesperson for Parkland Hospital in Dallas were asked by officials how many beds they have available to accommodate patients from this incident, and they remain on standby. Of course, if there are burn victims, and we can assume that's a good possibility, there are only certain hospitals that are able to best handle those kinds of patients. We'll be checking in with people at the hospitals as soon as we can find if any patients are being taken there. Let's take a look now at the scene earlier near Waco, Texas. This started about 1 p.m. Eastern time and quickly broke out into a huge fire, as you can see. It also involved at least one explosion, and we have been told by the agents all along, of course, that there's been a huge cache of weapons inside the compound, and it's not clear exactly what caused the explosion we saw earlier, if that was some munitions or something else.
Federal officials have also told us, as you just mentioned, that they believe the fire was intentionally set, and so while there was some suspicion that the tremendous explosion we saw earlier was the result of the weapons cache and the munitions cache igniting, it could also have been some fuel of some sort that was left behind to create that.
Bonnie, you know, it's going to be interesting to see if any of the weapons cache is left at all. We heard such stories of what armaments they had, rockets, those sorts of things, bombs, 50 caliber machine guns, AR-15s, AK-47s, and the like, 9mm pistols. Maybe that's all gone now. It boggles the mind. It would have been so good to be able to know really how well armed they really were.
So that was the scene a little more than an hour ago, and it didn't take long to get to the situation we would see now near Waco, Texas. The building is practically leveled, and there's very little left to burn. We'll continue our news coverage after this break.
What makes the budget gourmet entrees so different?
Things that make you go.
It's a bold splash, a sweet sauté. It's more than you'd expect for less than you'd expect. It's budget, it's gourmet, it's both.
2 a.m., 36 Pine Street. Apartment 4C has a backache and can't sleep. 3C overdid her afternoon workout and is paying the price. 2C had an aching back, but fortunately she also has Tylenol PM gel caps with extra strength Tylenol pain reliever, plus a gentle ingredient to help her sleep. And a good night's sleep was all she needed to make her day a whole lot brighter. Tylenol PM, so you can rest easy.
And unto Muffy and Lucky was born Blackie, and from Blackie issued forth Jerry and Teddy and Perry, whereafter Perry begat Sugar and Spice. Then came Whitey the meek and Samantha the brave. The world was then graced by Bruce the good, Flip, and Georgette the
Purina
Struggly.
Cat Chow brand cat food for cat chow care, generation after generation.
And Snookums.
Century Hardware, yes we care.
Now at Century Hardware, it's our brand name yard and home sale, where you'll save on the durable 16-inch plastic toolbox from Macro Mills with fully interlocking hinges and padlock eye, just $7.99.
Yes we can.
Get Anchor Swan's 5/8-inch by 60-foot WeatherFlex all-weather reinforced garden hose, just $9.99. Look for special savings now during our brand name yard and home sale.
Century Hardware, yes we can.
When she said I do, she didn't expect the abuse.
I told him he wasn't gonna beat me again, and I shot him.
Battered women who killed. Is it self-defense or murder? CNN presents Till Death Do Us Part, Sunday, May 2nd.
With every diet I was on, I couldn't lose weight because I was always hungry. But I lost 9 pounds, and I lost those 9 pounds because I took Dexatrim. Dexatrim just controls your appetite so you're not hungry.
Just one Dexatrim helps control your appetite from morning till bedtime, so you eat less and lose weight.
I have 3 children, and no, everybody goes, no, you can't have 3 children. But it's because of Dexatrim. I lost 9 pounds, and I feel great, and it shows.
Dexatrim. Nothing works harder to help you lose weight.
I was going over my bank statement, and I saw that my rates had never been so low. This is all I'm earning?
Common sense says you can't always depend on yesterday's solutions.
You've got to be kidding.
Fidelity Investments, America's largest mutual fund company, has the alternatives you may be looking for.
Are you sure you don't have time for lunch?
I gotta go to the bank.
Okay, I'll see you.
I was on my way to renew my CD. But when I saw those rates, well, lunch sounded pretty good.
Lunch, anyone?
Fidelity Investments can offer ways to help your savings earn more.
Oh, the rates on this thing?
Yeah?
I couldn't afford lunch.
That's why over 3 million people come to Fidelity for a wide range of investment choices, including mutual funds and discount brokerage. So call Fidelity now for this free guide, Common Sense Alternatives to Low Bank Rates. You'll also receive everything you need to start. Call Fidelity now at 1-800-528-5667. Fidelity Investments. Common sense. Uncommon results.
Every morning, wake up to CNN Morning News and wake up to a world of news, sports, weather, and fresh ideas. Join Donna Kelly and Bob Kane for all the news and information you need. CNN Morning News, weekdays 9 Eastern.
The FBI ran out of patience on the 51st day of the siege near Waco, saying it was through negotiating. Agents this morning tried to force an end to the long standoff and the surrender of David Koresh and his followers. Despite a hail of gunfire from inside the compound, an estimated 200 rounds, the FBI agents used an armored vehicle to rip huge holes in the Branch Davidian compound and pump tear gas inside. The FBI says its agents never returned fire, that the tear gas was a non-flammable type, and because of the children inside, dosages were well below lethal levels. The idea, an FBI spokesman said, was to make the environment as uncomfortable as possible for those inside and to avoid any attempt at a mass suicide.
We thought that this was probably the best way to prevent that type of suicide pact from taking place. That is, cause this confusion inside the compound. Also, we thought that their instincts, the motherly instincts would take place and that they would want their children out of that environment. It appears they don't care that much about their children, which is unfortunate. We have continually quizzed those coming out, and they as a general rule, state that suicide, they believe, is not a possibility.
But shortly after 1 p.m. Eastern, there was a puff of black smoke, which then started billowing out of the buildings. Shortly after, flames broke out and quickly spread to the other buildings in the huge compound. The fire had burned out of control for more than an hour and has been punctuated by huge explosions. Justice Department officials now say the fire was started by cult members. 95 people were believed to have been inside, including 17 children. We are being told that 20 of them made it out, at least 20 people. Hospitals are on standby, including Hillcrest Medical Center in Waco, and Rusty Dornan is reporting to us from there. Rusty?
Hillcrest Medical Center has been on low-level alert since about 7 o'clock this morning. Officials now tell me they're implementing their disaster plan. They're not outlining exactly what the details of that are, but they say they have brought in 14 extra nurses and 4 doctors are on call. Hillcrest does not have a burn unit, so any burn victims would be taken directly to Parkland Medical Center in Dallas. But emergency personnel here say they would be able to handle any other injuries, including any tear gas. Hospital officials have not been notified yet about any of the victims, the alleged 20 victims that may be on their way, that the ambulances are standing by for. I can tell you that members of the press sat along with hospital personnel in the waiting room here and watched CNN and watched the incredible pictures that unfolded. And over the last few weeks, there has been a lot of skepticism and possibly even cynicism about this story on the part of a lot of people. But I'll tell you, it was one of shock and disbelief on the part of all of us here who watched those pictures. Meantime, ATF agents have surrounded the area in Hillcrest Medical Center. There are armed agents with binoculars that are on top of several of the roofs. We did see agents taking rifle cases and things out of cars in the parking lot of Hillcrest Medical Center, so we're prepared for any sort of security problems or anything like that right now. So we are just awaiting word on whether any of the members will be brought here. Like I said, the hospital officials have not received any word from federal officials when and if any victims will be brought here. Rusty Dornan reporting live from Hillcrest Medical Center.
And CNN's Bonnie Anderson spent many long days studying the situation near Waco, Texas. Bonnie?
Well, today's developments, I can say, are in very sharp contrast to the original raid that began the standoff 51 days ago. February 28th was a Sunday, and most people were getting ready for church. About 9:30, that tranquility was shattered by the sound of gunfire just outside of town. February 28th, the bloodiest day in the history of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. 4 agents were cut down by automatic weapons fire, 16 others wounded as they attempted to serve a federal search warrant on cult leader David Koresh, long suspected of violating gun control laws. As families mourned, an embattled agency learned that David Koresh and his Branch Davidian followers had been tipped off and had 45 minutes to prepare their deadly ambush.
And, the door was slammed in our face, and we were immediately met by gunfire from numerous places.
But in a phone interview with CNN that night, Koresh claimed agents fired first as he stood at the front door.
They started firing at me. And so what happened is that I fell back in the door and the bullets started coming through the door. And so then what happened was some of the young men and stuff started firing on them. And I was already hollering. I was saying, go away. You know, I was hollering, go away. There's women and children here. Let's talk.
This standoff began. The ATF was joined by hundreds of FBI agents, and 3 days later, negotiators produced what they thought was a breakthrough.
Christ, he did something more than just fulfill prophecy.
In return for being allowed to air a 58-minute message on national television and radio networks, Koresh agreed to surrender. Buses were sent to the compound, and Waco hospitals went on full alert, but nothing happened.
In subsequent contacts with Koresh, he stated that he had received a message from God instructing him to wait.
While agents waited with him, they cut off access to the outside world, disabling the compound's phones and satellite dish, cutting off electricity. Little by little, Koresh released 21 children, though he kept 17 others, many fathered by him, inside the compound, angering federal agents.
He's using them as a shield, which is cowardly. We believe if he truly cared about those children, that they would be released.
14 adults were also allowed to leave. The elderly are now in halfway houses, held as material witnesses, while many of the younger members are charged with conspiracy to murder federal agents. In chains, many professed love for Koresh and his teachings.
When God decrees it so. Did APS fire first, gentlemen? Yes, they did. They did.
Still, Koresh continued to bait federal forces.
He has made such statements as, "We are ready for war. Let's get it on."
As the siege entered its third week, the FBI turned up the heat, blasting loud music and chanting to the compound over powerful loudspeakers, now and then playing recorded phone negotiations with Koresh to make sure cult members knew what he was saying. Indeed, as the standoff dragged on, federal authorities worried Koresh might be planning a mass suicide.
So as he becomes more and more withdrawn and more delusional, we're still very much concerned that he may force his followers to do things that are not rational.
Agents believed Koresh's wounds might be clouding his judgment, but Koresh and one of his wives, whose hand was infected, refused to come out for medical help.
Her suggestion to the doctor was perhaps she should just cut off her finger.
After weeks of phone discussions with the leader about his beliefs, frustrated negotiators ruled Bible class was over.
We're not here to be converted. We're here to try and get this thing resolved peacefully. So to that extent, we've made it clear that we want to talk about substantive issues, not the various seals.
But several true believers from around the country were interested in Koresh's teachings. While a few were arrested attempting to sneak into the compound, 2 men made it by, to the great embarrassment of the FBI. As the 5th week began, it was evident federal forces were losing patience.
All he is a cheap thug who interprets the Bible through the barrel of a gun.
Indeed, the standoff was a series of ups and downs.
We're not talking long-term according to what he's saying.
We are cautiously optimistic.
When 2 attorneys agreed to meet with Koresh and his right-hand man, they and the FBI believed the end was near.
I'm hopeful that this is some real progress and that we can bring this thing to an end real quickly.
That effort failed, though the lawyers came out saying Koresh and his followers would surrender after Passover week. Wary agents waited once again and made alternate plans.
If it doesn't happen, we're going to have to regroup, and we'll have to decide what other measures we can take. There are other weapons in our arsenal.
From the start, FBI officials said they were prepared for any eventuality, but given the fact there were no fire trucks on the scene this morning, it is clear that they never expected David Koresh and his followers to torch their own building. The fate of those who remained inside at this point is still unknown. CNN's live coverage will continue after this.
Homeowners, when termites, ants, or other pests invade your home, call Western. You'll like our caring people, experienced professionals who will inspect your home, protect your home, and respect your home. And you'll appreciate our careful pest control solutions, guaranteed or your money back. Call today for a free inspection and $25 off an annual plan if you require treatment. Western Termite and Pest Control, caring people, careful solutions since 1928.
Right now, you can lease the fun-to-drive Nissan 240SX for only $1,000 down and just $199 a month. Who says you can't always get what you want? The 240SX lease only at your Nissan dealer, but only for a very short time. Right now, you can lease the 300ZX, the sports car of sports cars, for the payment of payments. Only $1,800 down and just $399 a month. The Z lease only at your Nissan dealer, but only for a very short time.
This is CNN.
Thanks to Smart Rate from the Discover card, interest charges now have a whole new bottom line. Smart Rate, currently as low as 14.9%. It pays to Discover.
This year, give your secretary an office with a view.
The Singer Handy Stitch is now in stores everywhere. Just thread it in seconds and away you go. The durable chain stitch assures a clean, secure job every time. Nothing could be easier. There's no bobbin to wind, fuss with, or lose. Straight stitches, curved stitches, anything's a snap with Handy Stitch. Complete with battery pack, 5 mini spools of thread, an extension spindle, and all these accessories. It's a genuine singer. Now at fine stores everywhere.
I'm Terry Keenan reporting from the New York Stock Exchange. Stocks on Wall Street are giving back some of last week's record-setting gains. Computer and airline issues are weighing down the blue chips. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is off about 15 points at 34.63. Big board volume is heavy, though, off last week's brisk pace. 183 million shares traded so far. As for the other key indexes, they're all lower as well. The U.S. dollar is off sharply against the Japanese yen following President Clinton's calls Friday for a stronger Japanese currency. The dollar is off almost 1 yen against the Japanese yen, off 1.5 cents against the British pound. It's down 1 3/4 pfennigs against the German mark. Lower interest rates also hurting the U.S. dollar. The Treasury's 30-year bond is up 6/32 in price, and that's pulling the yield down to 6.73%. And that's all the business news for this hour. I'm Terry Keenan at the New York Stock Exchange.
I'm proud to introduce Templeton's new affiliation with Franklin Mutual Funds. Together, our combined strengths will offer a variety of investments matched by few others. At Templeton, we have over 50 years of experience investing globally and research offices worldwide. Our goal for investors, consistent, superior, long-term performance.
Strategies like this have attracted over 800,000 investors to the Templeton family of funds. Call 1-800-342-FUND.
To everyone worried about the rising cost of quality health care, come in under the caring and experience of one of America's largest managed health care networks. To everyone concerned about ensuring the future or having the security to reflect on the past, come in under assets $50 billion strong. Come in where America's dreams have been protected for 129 years. The Travelers, America's umbrella.
Czar wood stain goes way beyond ordinary stains because Czar is good for more than just wood.
Czar does more than it ever could, 'cause Czar is good for more than just wood.
Czar is versatile. It gives you the rich look of wood on all kinds of surfaces.
Czar looks great on fiberglass, gives your doors a look of class.
Goes on easy, right from the can. Czar wood stain. Versatile, beautiful, fast.
Czar is good for more than just wood. Czar.
What makes the Budget Gourmet entrees so different?
Things that make you go.
It's a bold splash, a sweet sauté. It's more than you'd expect for less than you'd expect. It's budget, it's gourmet, it's both.
Go ahead, scum. Make my day. Tough Soap Scum is no match for new X14 Soap Scum Remover. It cleans soap scum better. New X14 Soap Scum Remover.
Save up to $1.50 on X14. Look for these money-saving coupons in Sunday's paper.
This hour, we have no word still specifically on the fate of David Koresh and specific followers, only that we are now being told as many as 30 of them may have made it out of this compound before it went up in flames. Some 95 people, at least according to Koresh, were inside the compound at the time. And yet we don't yet have any word of any hospitals receiving patients. We do know that Parkland Hospital in Dallas is on standby, and Sue Mundell joins us now on the phone. What have you been told, Mrs. Mundell?
I understand there are 2 patients on their way by helicopter. They may be landing even as we speak.
And what kinds of patients? Do you specialize in treating burn victims?
I do not know that. They have not even shared that information because I understand communication lines out of Waco are very, very tight.
How early today did you know that you might be receiving patients from this situation?
The FBI called us about 12:30 to ask how many burn intensive care beds we had, and we told them 9 available.
And they're sending 2, as far as you know, right now.
That's right.
Okay, Sue Mundell, thank you, from Parkland Hospital. Some of the information that we're getting comes to us from the White House, and CNN's Wolf Blitzer is standing by there. Wolf?
Cheryl, White House officials say the president is keeping very much on top of this situation. He's being informed periodically by his senior staff, including White House Chief of Staff Mac McLarty and other officials here. The president has apparently also been told by the Justice Department that all of the indications are that the fire was set from within, presumably by some of David Koresh's followers. The officials here are being pretty categorical on that point, saying there's no evidence that the fire was even inadvertently set by the FBI forces that were on the ground and initiated this operation early this morning. We're also told that the president was informed of the tactical details of the operation yesterday on Sunday when he spoke with Attorney General Janet Reno. She authorized the operation based on all of the recommendations from the FBI, which she, of course, oversees. Judge Sessions, the FBI director, was obviously on board as well. U.S. officials are making it clear that the president did not object to any of these operational details when he was informed of them, and as a result, he at least implicitly authorized the operation, although George Stephanopoulos, the communications director, insists the president himself did not initiate the operation. All of the tactical details are being put together by experts, Stephanopoulos says, and the president does not want to interfere with the best experts the U.S. has in trying to mount this kind of an operation. Even though we don't know all of the details of what exactly happened, how the fire started, how many casualties may or may not have resulted from this fire and from the operation earlier this morning, already some questions are being raised up on Capitol Hill. Indeed, Republican Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, member of the Judiciary Committee, has already called for hearings on what exactly has occurred today and in the past 50 or so days since this incident developed. Indeed, Specter telling reporters only a short while ago, quote, "At this moment, I think it is impossible to evaluate the wisdom of what the FBI did, and I think we will have to await the events to cool off both figuratively and literally before we take a look at it. But I think the entire Waco incident is something the Judiciary Committee ought to be holding hearings on. Certainly one more problem facing an already burdened President Clinton." Wolf Blitzer, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
Wolf, Bonnie Anderson's sources had told her in the past days that an operation like this had been planned a couple of times, and yet the FBI was not able to get approval for it until obviously this day. Do you know anything about that?
We do know that officials here in Washington were extremely concerned about additional loss of life in trying to resolve this situation, and all of the indications we had here at the White House were that officials at the Justice Department, at the Treasury Department, which oversees the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, all of these officials were hoping that this matter could be resolved peacefully, but apparently a plan was put together, at least in the wisdom of those who were in charge at Justice as well as at Treasury, which presumably officials thought would result in minimal, if any, loss of life, and as a result they informed the president of it yesterday, Janet Reno, the Attorney General, and he said go ahead in effect, and that's what we're seeing today. We don't know what the outcome, of course, is. That all of those pieces of information are coming out, but we do know that officials were very concerned about additional loss of life after the initial unsuccessful assault on the compound, and those were the instructions given to the FBI and to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
CNN's Wolf Blitzer reporting to us from the White House. Newsday continues after this break.
In the war against termites, only one company has a weapon like this. The exterminator, the Orkin Man. And now he's armed with the latest technology, the Orkin Foam System. Orkin Foam is the most effective termite treatment ever. Unlike other methods, it penetrates completely to stop termites cold, guaranteed. And only the exterminator has it, the Orkin Man. One call destroys them all.
If you suffer from an inflamed, itchy rash caused by eczema, psoriasis, or other skin irritations, you can get the relief medication formerly available only by doctor's prescription. It's the medicine in maximum strength cortisone 10. Look, cortisone 10 applied to this itchy rash gets under the itch for soothing relief and help in healing. See? The rash is gone. To relieve itchy rashes and skin irritations, use maximum strength cortisone 10 with the medicine doctors recommend most. Available without prescription.
Do you know what you need to know about managing your money? Take the Wall Street Journal Personal Finance Test and find out. How can you correct an inaccurate credit rating? Why are April and October the most popular months for buying CDs? How long is a personal check valid? You'll find the answers in this free book, The Wall Street Journal Guide to Understanding Personal Finance. The guide is filled with information, from financing your new car to refinancing your home. There's even information on how to lower your taxes. It's yours free when you subscribe to The Wall Street Journal. Every business day, The Wall Street Journal gives you the news, analysis, and insights you need to make the right decisions for your business, your career, your future. Subscribe now to The Wall Street Journal. Get 13 weeks of the journal for $37, over 20% off the newsstand price, and your free copy of the Guide to Personal Finance.
Call 800-544-3800. That's 800-544-3800.
Bonnie Anderson, once the initial raid went wrong, one has to wonder if the agents were sort of in a no-win situation. They became criticized the longer this went on, seen as being manipulated by David Koresh to no avail, and yet knowing that if they moved in and tried to do anything to resolve it, that something like this was always a possibility.
Well, it's very clear that the entire situation in Waco has been under investigation and will continue to be under investigation. Within hours of the original failed raid on March 28th, the Texas Rangers launched an investigation into that raid, into the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Specifically, one of the points they're looking at is whether or not the ATF knew that they had lost the element of surprise. And indeed, I've spoken with several sources, several agents who were on the ground the day of the raid, and they reported to me that the undercover agent who was inside the building 45 minutes prior to the raid was told by David Koresh that Koresh knew the National Guard and the ATF were on their way. The agent was allowed to leave. He immediately called the tactical commanders who were at the staging site just a few miles away and told them David Koresh is on to it. He knows what the plan is. He is prepared, and he recommended they cancel the raid. This same agent, we're told, was then stunned to hear that the raid had continued. So there is an investigation going on in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms by the Texas Rangers, and according to what Wolf Blitzer just reported, clearly the FBI is now coming under scrutiny for the handling of today's assault. Cheryl?
Bonnie, thank you. At the time, when you're talking about that possibly an agent inside the compound knew, did the agent never knew that the ATF had a plant inside, did it, before this happened? Or is that unclear?
Koresh was clear. It was quite obvious to members inside the compound, and this comes to people I've spoken with who are now in jail, that this undercover agent was indeed an agent. They had made comments to him that were quite pointed, but they also allowed him to continue coming in. He even had weapons practice with them at times. So it was very clear that his cover had been blown, but as long as he was still allowed to go into the compound, he continued to go. Now on the line with us now is David Jewell, whose ex-wife is in the compound. Mr. Jewell's daughter was also a member, I believe a teenage daughter, and recently got out of the compound. You were very worried about your daughter before you left. Did you ever imagine something like this would happen?
Well, first of all, I was never in any way affiliated with the group. My sole connection with them has been in context of getting my daughter away from them. Had they had their will, my daughter would have been inside that fire today.
You once spoke of the conversation, or a conversation you had on the phone with David Koresh, and the power you felt he had over people. Can you recount that for us?
He is, without question, a powerful man, if in no other way than that he has or had the capacity to somehow discern what your weaknesses were, your emotional or psychological weaknesses, and capitalizing on those. I came from a very fundamentalist Christian home, was raised with religion being a very strong part of my upbringing, and as a result had very deep-seated religious viewpoints. And within 20 minutes of being on the telephone with him, he had found a way to make me question everything I had ever believed in, to the extent that my own sister, who knows me probably better than certainly most people, if not anyone, was fearful that I was going to go and join the compound for a period of a week or so thereafter. He has had an incredible ability to sort of turn your head around and make it very difficult for you to think clearly.
As you've watched the live pictures this morning, certainly there must be some very distressing moments for you. Has your daughter seen the coverage? Is she aware of what has happened at Mount Carmel today? And if so, how is she taking it?
Yes, she's very, very much aware of what has happened today, and I would have to say that at least on the surface, she appears to be taking it much better than I am even. She has said from the very beginning, although we have not said anything publicly because we didn't want to influence events, she has indicated from the beginning that there was no way those people were ever coming out peacefully, and that this would end in some kind of a destructive conclusion.
With her mother inside the compound, this must be then a very difficult day for her.
It is. It absolutely is.
Mr. Jewell, thank you very much for joining us. Cheryl?
Bonnie, thank you. We do have some new information to report. A spokesman for Attorney General Janet Reno says that 8 cult members are in federal custody near Waco today. The spokesperson says 2 of those cult members have admitted they are the ones who started the fire that burned down this cult compound in less than an hour. You may recall that some FBI snipers said they spotted 2 people they believed to be cult members at each end of the compound starting that fire today. Ironically, those 2 people are out safely. 6 other cult members in custody are injured, we are told, but no word on how badly. A Dallas hospital says 2 of the survivors are being flown to the hospital by military helicopter there. And we do hope to have continuing updates from the hospitals as they possibly receive patients. We are told that as many as 30 people may have made it out of this compound. There were some 95 believed inside. We'll take this opportunity to take a break and be back after this.
I think I'll make fresh dressing.
Good seasons?
Mm-hmm.
Which oil?
Pick a light one.
Dressing's great.
Good seasons. You make it fresh, you make it best.
Day after day, you make those glasses of thick Metamucil disappear. Why not make them all disappear with FiberCon? Doctor-recommended FiberCon gives you the same fiber regularity in tablets.
Easy to swallow tablets.
Get doctor-recommended FiberCon.
I was going over my bank statement, and I saw that my rates had never been so low. This is all I'm earning?
Common sense says you can't always depend on yesterday's solutions.
You've got to be kidding.
Fidelity Investments, America's largest mutual fund company, has the alternatives you may be looking for.
Look, are you sure you don't have time for lunch?
I gotta go to the bank.
Okay, I'll see you.
I was on my way to renew my CD. But when I saw those rates, well, lunch sounded pretty good.
Lunch, anyone?
Fidelity Investments can offer ways to help your savings earn more.
Oh, the rates on this thing?
Yeah?
I couldn't afford lunch.
That's why over 3 million people come to Fidelity for a wide range of investment choices, including mutual funds and discount brokerage. So call Fidelity now for this free guide, Common Sense Alternatives to Low Bank Rates. You'll also receive everything you need to start. Call Fidelity now at 1-800-528-5667. Fidelity Investments. Common sense. Uncommon results.
And now, briefly, 007 reasons to watch James Bond Wednesday. Thank you for your patience. It's Wednesday night double features. James Bond Wednesday. Every Wednesday on TBS.
A short recap of some of the latest developments near Waco, Texas. First of all, Associated Press is quoting a spokesperson for Attorney General Janet Reno as saying 8 cult members are now in federal custody. That 2 of them admitted starting the fire, according to the spokesperson, that consumed this cult compound in less than an hour this afternoon. And they reportedly say they used torches to start the fires. 6 other cult members in custody are reported to be injured. No word on how badly. Some 20 to 30 cult members of the 95 or so believed to have been inside made it out. CNN's Mike Capps is standing by near Waco. Mike?
Well, Cheryl, we've within the past 5 minutes, we've seen the first ambulance leave the compound. Do not know who was in it, what kind of injuries there were, but the ambulance sped away. Secondly, I can tell you that attorneys for David Koresh and Steve Schneider, Dick DeGuerin, and Jack Zimmerman from Houston are on their way to Waco, and we expect to hear from them sometime this afternoon, and they undoubtedly will have a lot to say about the events that have unfolded here in Waco over the past few hours. Of course, the ATF's move into the compound, the FBI's move into the compound, their tear gas, and then the fire that started, and now we're hearing that 2 cult members have admitted starting that fire, but Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Zimmerman had intended to escort their clients out when this was over, and obviously that's not going to happen now, but we will expect to hear from them later on this afternoon, Cheryl.
We still have no idea yet whether David Koresh and one of his chief lieutenants, I guess, that he's been calling himself, Steve Schneider, are 2 of those who were able to have made it out among all those. And we have no idea whether many of them were children or any of them were children. And we were told by the tally from David Koresh that there were 78 adults and 17 children. Of course, his description of what a child is younger than most other people would say so.
Exactly.
Under 18 years old, there were 25 inside rather than 17. What is his, Mike Capps, his criteria is under 10?
Exactly.
Is a child, and
10
over
and
10 is an adult.
Right.
So,
and those are just a few of the many questions, Cheryl, that remain unanswered here. The guns, the crime scene, lots and lots of questions left unanswered, and many of the answers may have gone up in smoke.
Once the fire started, as quickly as it spread, besides the fact that there were no fire trucks even nearby, it looked like there was really nothing fire officials could have done to put that out, didn't it?
It certainly did not appear that way. We've just seen a 2nd and 3rd ambulance go by here. Pardon me for being distracted, but we've seen the 2nd and 3rd ambulances go by, apparently headed to the hospital. No, Cheryl, the winds, as Flip Spiceland said a little while ago, we're getting gusts of 30 miles an hour out here, and once the fire started, it appeared the Branch Davidian compound was a tinderbox, and even had firemen been standing by on the scene when the fire broke out, there's no real water supply in that place, and pumper trucks carrying 350 to 750 gallons of water, only 2 trucks, 1,500 gallons of water on a fire like that. Forget it. No way they could have made much of a difference at all, if any.
Thank you, Mike. Bonnie, can you recap, starting from a couple of hours before dawn today when this thing started to unfold for our viewers briefly, how this happened and led to the fire?
What federal officials said in the press conference this morning was that shortly before dawn, they called the compound. They said, come out. We need, this is it. We have, our patience has ended. They were indeed hung up on. They then started poking holes into the side of the building using armored vehicles and delivering tear gas under pressure. At that point, they continued to say, this is non-lethal tear gas, come out. There are proper authorities out here, surrender yourself. No one surrendered. And it was a short while after that that indeed we saw flames coming out of one of the windows, which then led to the entire fire. One of the points that we need to repeat is that while some of the people have come out, it is still not clear. We still have no idea about the fate of the other members of the religious community inside of Mount Carmel. There is an underground bunker of sorts. We do know that it is connected by a bus that had been buried. Now, federal agents, sources in the FBI had told me within the past 3 or 4 weeks that in that bus were the bodies of 4 members who were wounded the day of the original raid, February 28th, and that indeed their bodies had been buried inside that truck. So whether or not that would also be used as a shelter at this point is unknown.
In the few seconds we have left this hour, you were privy to some discussions of the planning phases of these with your sources when you were near Waco, Texas, and this was something that they really never expected to happen.
This was never foreseen. They truly believed once they delivered the tear gas that the people would be coming out no later than 2 hours.
Okay, Bonnie Anderson, thank you. The news continues on CNN. Stay with us.
A brand new Acura for less than the payment on an ordinary car? Only at Faulkner Acura. A new Acura Integra. $199 a month and only $750 down. A brand new Acura with air conditioning, AM/FM stereo cassette, and much more. $199 a month and only $750 down. An availability of 30 Integras. Faulkner Acura, Hyundai, Subaru, Route 13, DuPont Highway, just a mile south of the Wilmington Airport. Faulkner, to be sure.
College has been replaced by career. Midnight snacks are now midnight feedings. And as life changes and families grow, more and more people are carrying the card from Keystone Health Plan East, the HMO from Independence Blue Cross and Pennsylvania Blue Shield. Keystone gives them the comprehensive benefits they want and the security they trust. Maybe that's why Keystone's the fastest growing HMO in the country. The HMO you carry for life.
Honey, I'm frightened about buying our first house.
Me too. Mortgage rates, closing costs. It's going to be another sleepless night.
Maybe not. Remember when John and Nancy bought their first house and Chuck and Joan refinanced?
Yeah. They went to Pinnacle. They got custom mortgages to meet their needs. Let's call Pinnacle in the morning.
Good idea.
At Pinnacle, we'll meet your needs. We've got you covered.
Many have witnessed its awesome power. It is a strategic device of immense importance. It can bring into range an entire nation, a single neighborhood, or any segment of the populace. And most remarkable of all, it's growing even stronger as advertisers and viewers use it in record numbers from Main Street to Madison Avenue, America's sole town cable.
This is CNN.
Day 51 of a dramatic standoff in Waco, Texas, a day of high tension.
The compound occupied by about 100 cult members goes up in flames. To our viewers around the world, good evening from London. I'm Hilary Bowker.
And good afternoon from Washington. I'm Frank Sesno. Charred ruins. Apparently that's all that's left of the Branch Davidian cult compound near Waco, Texas. About 2 hours ago, it went up in flames. A Clinton administration official says the fire was deliberately set by at least 2 cult members. The FBI says 25 to 30 people made it out alive, and the Associated Press quotes Attorney General Janet Reno as saying 8 of them are now in federal custody. David Koresh and about 100 followers had been holed up for 51 days. The day's events started with federal agents ramming compound walls and firing tear gas inside. CNN's Brian Jenkins is at the scene. He joins us now live. Brian?
Frank, I am here at the barricade, which was the last checkpoint for law enforcement vehicles and emergency vehicles going up to the staging area about a mile away from the compound, which burned to the ground about 2 hours ago. In the past 10 minutes, I have seen 6 ambulances coming out from the staging area heading toward the city of Waco. There may have been more ambulances that I did not see before that time. We have heard reports from the U.S. Justice Department that at least 20 people, or as many as 20 people, survived the fire. There has been another report here locally that there were 8 people who were brought into federal custody after escaping the fire, that 2 of those people were the 2 who allegedly, according to the FBI, set the fire at the complex on opposite ends of this huge series of buildings that covers a city block area. We have also heard a report, which I cannot confirm, that one of the fire survivors indicated that David Koresh had said to his followers as the fire were set, just sit back and wait until you see God. We have not been able to confirm that report, but there is a great deal of shock and I would suppose even sadness here among the journalists at what we call Satellite City, who have been covering this standoff for 51 days. No one, I believe, wanted to see it end this way. Frank?
Thanks very much, Brian. We're going to go now to WFAA's Dennis Johnson, who's just outside Parkland Hospital, outside of Dallas. Dennis, is there any sign of any injured or any activity there?
Frank, not at this point. What we have been told by the ATF down near Waco is that 3 Huey helicopters were coming this way, and one of them has 2 female burn patients. This is not from the hospital, but this is coming from ATF outside Waco. The hospital here was alerted at 11 minutes after 6 this morning, and they were being asked questions by the FBI, such as, where exactly is your helipad? How many helicopters can you take? And Parkland here in Dallas, being a level 1 trauma center, can accommodate a lot. And in fact, they can take 3 helicopters on their pad, but if they're the big Chinook military style, they can only take 1. Some Hueys are coming this way again with 2 patients. We don't know how badly burned they may be. The Parkland Burn Unit is one of several in the state of Texas. It is well known throughout the country. Obviously, there are burn patients already here. The staff here at Parkland says they will do all that they can to make sure that those victims can be accommodated. We also understand that 4 patients have been taken to San Antonio, and that would presumably be to the Brooke Army Medical Center, where they have a world-famous military burn unit. Herman Hospital in Houston also has a burn unit, and there is also one in Galveston, the Shriners Burn Unit for children. So it's possible that every burn unit in the state of Texas may be on alert for this. The other question is that we have not had answered by the people here at Parkland. There are a lot of ATF and presumably some FBI people here as well, although they have not told Parkland officials yet exactly what they are doing here and why and how long they'll be here. That will become more evident as the afternoon goes on. So we are basically waiting for the arrival of the burn victims. Again, some people ask, well, what kind of gearing up did the hospital have to do? Because this is a level 1 trauma center, they are basically geared up all the time. If there was a huge influx of patients, they would call in extra people on what they call a disaster alert, which was similar to what happened back in 1985 with the Delta 191 crash and in 1988 with Delta 1141. But at this point, no extra people have been called in. We are just standing here waiting. This is Dennis Johnson reporting for CNN in Dallas. Frank, back to you.
Dennis, before you go away, for our viewers in the United States and especially around the world who are watching at this time and may not be familiar with the geography, how far is Dallas from Waco? What sort of distance would people be traveling? What period of time would it take?
Frank, it is 90 miles from Dallas to Waco. I know because my son goes to Baylor University there. And it is an hour and 45-minute drive by helicopter, and I'm not real good at factoring airspeeds and distances like that, but it would take a lot less than an hour and 45 minutes that you would have to travel on the ground.
Okay. WFAA's Dennis Johnson, thanks very much for your time. CNN's Bonnie Anderson has spent a great deal of time covering the standoff. She joins us now from CNN Center in Atlanta. Bonnie, any late-breaking developments that you've heard of or any poignant analysis at this time that sheds any light on the events, dramatic events we've witnessed today?
I think one of the things that strikes me as a bit odd is we're hearing that 8 people are in custody. Then we're also hearing that 25 to 30 people were able to exit the compound prior to the fire starting. It would seem to me that anybody exiting the compound would be taken into custody, so I think we have to be wary of those numbers. At the very least, every single member who has come out over the past 51 days has been held as a material witness. At the most, some have been charged with murder of federal agents. So I think we need to keep an eye on those numbers, and also keep in mind that there is no word on the remaining people, whether or not they are indeed in underground bunkers, whether they were able to survive a fire of that magnitude or not.
Bonnie, do you have any indication from the conversations you've had with your sources related to this story as to what degree of information has been provided by those who've come out of the compound and are now under arrest?
Very little. In fact, prior to leaving the compound, every single member had to meet with David Koresh in a private session. They called it a Bible study, but it was also very clear from what they were saying to reporters and to federal officials that there had been some sort of briefing going on. I spoke with a number of these people in prison and jail. We'd ask them how many people died in the original raid, and they would not comment. We asked them whether any children died. I was told that one was critically wounded in the initial conflict, but again, they wouldn't let us know if that child died. So they were very well briefed as to what to say, what areas to stay completely away from. Their main goal was to continue to preach about the 7 seals and to continue to insist that the FBI needed to let David Koresh get his word out.
Bonnie, there have been any number of diatribes over the past 51 days from David Koresh and his followers. Hints in there, as you've heard them, as to the final motivations of this group, that this group had no intention of coming out peacefully?
That has been made that point is made rather strongly on a number of occasions. And just last week, again, I was speaking with one member of Koresh's inner circle who is at the McLennan County Jail in Waco. He made it very clear to me that David Koresh would not come out peacefully until, they said, God told him to. But what they were also doing was expecting some very cataclysmic event to happen following Passover. That it did not was very disturbing to them. And at that point, they were saying, well, David must stay now because these are the prophecies. He has predicted this. If he comes out now and these events don't happen, then they hinted that they would know that indeed he was not who he claimed to be, that he might be a fraud. And so the concern was they would stay in there until somebody forced them out.
Okay, Bonnie, thanks very much. Well, what began with a bloody shootout 51 days ago ended roughly 2 hours ago with a wind-driven fire. CNN's Sonia Friedman was anchoring at the time, and on the phone with her, David Koresh's mother, Bonnie Haldeman.
All along they have said that they would not do anything drastic, that they would let him write his book, and he said when he got through writing the 7 seals, he would come out, which I figured would take a couple of weeks. And I was really surprised when I was watching the TV this morning and saw what was happening. And it scares me because those are not bad people in there.
Your son, however, though, also told federal authorities on March 2nd that as soon as a 58-minute tape speech of his was indeed aired on national radio and television, he would come out, and he didn't. And there have been other promises he's made that he has not kept. What made you believe, what led you to believe that this time he would indeed come out, would indeed surrender with his followers?
Well, he told Mr. DeGuerin that, and Mr. DeGuerin had faith that he was, and all I could do is believe because, you know, all I know is what the rest of y'all hear, that hoping and believing that that's what he would do.
According to what your son has told FBI officials and negotiators, he was indeed wounded in the side and in the hand during the original raid. What kind of condition do you believe he's in now? Have they given you any additional information?
I haven't had any information. I have no idea. All I've gotten is what I hear on the radio and in the paper.
As you can see on your screen, there is a great deal of smoke coming out of the building. Let's go to Mike Capps. We can also see some flames there now. Mike, what can you tell us? What can you see?
Bonnie, for the last 15 minutes, we've watched this M60 vehicle, this combat engineering vehicle, make large holes in the side of this building and pump tear gas in there. At times, as you well know, tear gas can be incendiary, and apparently this is what's happened. And it looks like now we have a very large-scale fire breaking out on what must be the south side, right near the front side of this building. These are some amazing pictures here. A fire has broken out, and let's just stay with this and watch it for a few minutes if we can. As I said, this combat engineering vehicle has been working very diligently around the front door of the complex, and First he'd take his shovel in and scoop something out. Then he'd turn around with a turret and pump tear gas in. And
Mike, it appears that this is the portion of the building that is on fire right now is part of an observation tower that is adjacent to the front door. It's also on the second floor, which is where the women's sleeping quarters are. Did you see on the other side around the other side of this building whether or not tear gas had been put in at that level?
No, I didn't, but Bob Ricks indicated that in the news conference, Bonnie, that they'd put tear gas all over the building. What that means is anybody's guess. This is a roaring fire here. And I don't know if there are any fire trucks even. I haven't seen any fire trucks come up. I don't know if there are any fire trucks at the compound even. So this fire is really burning out of control here.
Well, and we also have to remind viewers that water has been turned off. The water pump does not work at the facility. It has been disabled by the FBI about the second week of this raid.
Now, and also remember, we've had 35 to 40 mile an hour winds, and this fire is racing out of control. Black smoke would indicate some sort of perhaps tar on the roof or oil. Perhaps something burning there.
Another thing to remember is the room that FBI agents believe held the weapons cache is right in that general vicinity. So there could be the danger.
Right, we're talking about the opportunity of explosives going off at any moment, I suspect.
FBI agents have told us on several occasions that the cult was armed with grenades. They had rocket-propelled grenades. They had hand grenades and other explosives. Indeed, that was part of the original search and arrest warrant. So it would...
This fire is really rolling now.
And what you now see is what is left of what was the branch.
Virtually burned to the ground. Federal officials say, as we told you a moment ago, that 8 people, we believe, have escaped. An estimated 95 adults and children were believed to be inside. The Justice Department tells the White House the fire was set deliberately by cult members. Black nationalist leader Chris Hani was buried today in South Africa. More than 80,000 supporters attended the funeral at a soccer stadium. There was some violence outside. Hani was assassinated 9 days ago, allegedly by a white man. UN peacekeepers are in Srebrenica evacuating sick and wounded Muslims to Tuzla, one of the few safe havens left for them to go. A team of Canadian peacekeepers arrived yesterday. So far, about 250 people have been airlifted out.
And now a check of the day's financial news around the world with Terry Keenan at the New York Stock Exchange. Terry?
Thanks, Frank. Stock prices in the U.S. are shedding some of last week's gains. The Dow added more than 80 points last week, closing at a record high on Friday. But with a half hour left before the close today, the Dow is off more than 11 points, trading at the 3466 level. Volume is heavy, 217 million shares traded so far, while the broader and secondary markets are all lower as well. Most computer shares are lower on Wall Street following the lead of chipmaker Intel. Intel is down 11.25 points after a U.S. federal judge ruled rival Advanced Micro Devices can clone Intel's top-selling 486 computer chip. Shares of AMD are up 4 points on that news. Checking some other computer stocks, Dell is down a point, Hewlett-Packard off 1 3/4, Compaq is down 7/8. The U.S. dollar continues its plunge against the Japanese yen following Friday's suggestion by President Clinton that a stronger yen might curb Japan's trade surplus. The dollar's now trading just above the 111 yen level. It is also lower against the major European currencies. And that's the latest in U.S. financial headlines. I'm Terry Keenan at the New York Stock Exchange. Now for a look at the day's European business news, here's Grant Perry in our London bureau.
Europe's equity markets, with the exception of Paris, posting gains today. Milan surging. The BCI holding an early celebration of the expected yes vote in the Italian referenda on electoral reform. The index rallying 12 points, more than 2%, to reach the 525 level. It was a quiet day in London, the Financial Times 100 index adding just 5.6. In Frankfurt, expectations that lower French interest rates will allow the German central bank room to maneuver sent the DAX up 14. But France's CAC 40 had expected the move. It slipped 17. The French central bank cut its key intervention rate by 35 basis points to 8.75%. It's the second cut in a week. In corporate news, Eurotunnel, the Anglo-French construction project which is building a tunnel under the English Channel, says there are new financing problems jeopardizing its opening date. Eurotunnel says it may need to find another £850 million, that's $1.3 billion, in order to open the tunnel. It was originally due to open next month. Those are the top business stories in Europe tonight. I'm Grant Perry at the CNN Business News Desk in London.
Most investors consider things like yield or growth before they invest, but the most important consideration might be taxes. Franklin has an answer.
Yes, Franklin has a tax-free fund for every investor in every state.
Fact is, Franklin is the largest manager of tax-free municipal funds in the country.
We offer a broad range of innovative mutual funds so that investors can target their financial goals.
Call Franklin or your investment advisor today. Call 1-800-342-FUND.
Now Philips has captured some of the most educational and entertaining experiences imaginable on a new kind of compact disc called CD Interactive. With your TV, you can put your family in the center of the action. Capture the experience by calling for your free CD Interactive kit now. It's your introduction to this new world of TV entertainment. Call now and find out where to go for a free, no-obligation demonstration.
Yeah, all right.
And details about getting Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia disc free during our special offer period. So experience CD Interactive for yourself. All it takes is a call now to get big savings and more. Find out how to make your TV come alive. CD Interactive, the imagination machine. Another first from Philips. Call now for the special event date and location in your area.
Baseball is a game of numbers, but the most important numbers aren't in the box scores. They're on the balance sheets. With money as the game's dominant player, can America's favorite pastime survive? A 5-part series on Moneyline begins tonight on CNN.
Italy's voters have overwhelmingly approved a plan that could radically reshape their government. Polls conducted after the country's weekend referendum indicate Italians have voted to toss out proportional representation in favor of more direct elections and to end huge government subsidies to political parties. The referendum for change comes in the wake of a 14-month corruption scandal. It also linked several top politicians to the mafia. The vote could also mark the end of the 10-month-old government of Socialist Premier Giuliano Amato.
A U.S. presidential envoy to Vietnam says he has doubts about a document on American prisoners of war recently discovered in the former Soviet archives. This after meetings with top Vietnamese officials. The document reportedly written in 1972 by a Vietnamese general said Hanoi was holding 1,205 American POWs. That's a far cry from the 368 Americans that Vietnamese officials said they had at the time. Hanoi says the document is a fake. A UN team of nuclear experts arrived in Iraq today, but they won't be conducting more inspections this time. Their mission will be to arrange to ship almost 90 pounds of radiated material out of Iraq. The material could be equipment that was used to produce enriched uranium. An earlier UN team reportedly dismantled such equipment at a former nuclear plant last December.
In Poland today, a time for tears and painful memories, where thousands of Jews gathered to mark the anniversary of what's come to be known as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. As CNN's Bob Reynolds reports, it was 50 years ago today that a courageous group of Polish Jews stood up to the Nazis.
By the tens of thousands, they came to Warsaw to bear witness and to remember. Some were survivors of the desperate last stand of Warsaw's Jews against the Nazis. Others came to try and heal old wounds, or simply to show respect. Yitzhak Rabin, the first Israeli prime minister ever to visit Poland, joined in ceremonies at the Umschlagplatz, the gathering place where 300,000 Jews were forced aboard trains bound for the gas chambers of Treblinka. The United States delegation was headed by Vice President Albert Gore. Despite the solemn ceremony sponsored by the Polish government, there was disturbing evidence of lingering anti-Semitism in Poland. A small group of far-right Polish skinheads gathered Sunday to shout anti-Jewish slogans. 50 years ago, the barren concrete plaza that now surrounds a monument to the heroes of the uprising was at the center of the ghetto. When the Germans invaded Poland, they packed Warsaw's 500,000 Jews into the neighborhood and surrounded it with walls and barbed wire. Hundreds of thousands died of starvation or disease, or were seized and shipped to the Nazis' death camps. In April 1943, 60,000 Jews remained. Determined not to be destroyed without a struggle, they rose up against the German army, and though hopelessly outnumbered and armed mostly with pistols and homemade bombs, they fought courageously for nearly a month. In the end, Nazi shells, tanks, and flamethrowers utterly destroyed the Warsaw Ghetto. Only a handful of Jewish resistance fighters survived.
It was one of the great turning points in the destruction of Polish Jewry. But at the same time, I think it was an unparalleled act of heroism, the way the Jewish community there, almost unarmed, fought for several weeks against the German army.
Rabbi Sachs says the fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto left an eternal legacy to the world, a plea not to stand by and let genocide happen. A plea, he says, that is once more going unheeded, this time in places like Sarajevo and Srebrenica.
50 years after the Warsaw Ghetto, we can still hear talk about and see on our television screens ethnic cleansing, attempted genocide, racial war, all the things that we thought that after the Holocaust would never happen again.
Never again. That was the vow the Jews made after the Nazis were finally crushed. But one survivor of the ghetto uprising, referring to Bosnia, Somalia, and Cambodia, said on Monday the Holocaust has not ended. Rob Reynolds, CNN, reporting.
And one last time, we want to bring you up to date in this hour of the very, very latest we have learned regarding the siege in Waco, Texas, which apparently ended earlier today in flames. Justice Department sources close to the investigation in Waco now say that only 8 people survived, 7 men and a woman. All others are presumed dead. Again, our sources tell us that all others beyond those 8 are presumed to have died. The identities of those who survived have not been revealed. However, David Koresh is not among them. Again, Koresh apparently not among the survivors. Our sources say that all of these 8 survivors are in federal custody, 4 injured, 2 of them in critical condition. One woman was said to have been grabbed by FBI agents as she attempted to run back into the burning building. And according to a Justice Department source, authorities there had to struggle with her to prevent her from running back inside. So once again, the news as we have it is that 8 apparently survived the inferno there. All others, apparently including David Koresh, are believed to have died. That is it for this edition of the International Hour. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Frank Sesno in Washington. See you, Hillary.
Good night, Frank. And I'm Hillary Bowker in London. Now here's Ralph Wenge with CNN World Report. Ralph?
Thank you. Coming up, we'll find out how successful Israeli companies have been in replacing Palestinian workers from the occupied territories with Israeli workers. And we'll take a look at the tensions in Egypt between Muslim fundamentalists and Egyptian Christians.
This year, give your secretary an office with a view.
I say I'm too young for gum disease, but my dentist says I'm at risk. So I got the new Colgate Precision toothbrush. It removes more plaque than the leading toothbrushes, which is important at my age.
Fighting gum disease takes precision.
This pitcher holds 2.3 pounds of water. That's what's trapped in your body tissue before and during your period. It made me bloated and irritable, and my clothes felt tight until I discovered Aquaban.
Aquaban is clinically proven safe and effective.
It really helps reduce the bloating, the puffiness, and that uncomfortable swelling. So now my clothes fit again, and I feel a lot better. And Aquaban carries the Good Housekeeping seal.
Aquaban can help you get rid of the bloat every month.
You've just poured the milk on your bowl of Kellogg's Crispets when something keeps you from it. Good thing Crispets has a special shape that stands up to milk. So even if you can't get to it right away, Crispix still stays crispy and great tasting.
They're still crispy.
Kellogg's Crispix, the taste that waits for you.
I really didn't want my husband to color his gray hair.
But then I discovered this, the hair coloring called Just for Men.
And now he looks better than ever.
Simply apply Just for Men, and in 5 minutes, rinse. Just for Men blends away the gray for a totally natural look. No wonder 8 out of 10 women prefer the Just for Men look to the gray look.
It's like you took off 10 years.
And in just 5 minutes.
Just for Men. She'll love the way you look.
That our plan was correct and was conducted with professionalism and care. I applaud the restraint shown by our agents in the face of life-threatening gunfire, and I thank them for risking their lives to try to end this peacefully. I have only the greatest admiration for all those involved. I would now like to go through a reading of the events that transpired today. This morning, I gave a brief statement regarding the insertion of gas into the compound, which started at 5:55. I gave you the warnings that were given at that time. I will not repeat those unless they're needed later. After gunfire started, and actually gunfire started before we inserted any gas. We had over 75 to 80 rounds that were fired at our FBI agents before the gas was actually inserted in the building. The FBI continued broadcasting messages over the loudspeaker system for people to exit the building toward the sound of the speakers to be rescued. Non-lethal gas was inserted into the compound at approximately 6:04 a.m. It is our belief that the occupants used gas masks to protect themselves. There were enough gas masks for all of the adults in the compound. The gas used was non-pyrotechnic CS gas, which does not cause a spark or flame. Also, the delivery system utilized is also non-pyrotechnic. There were no injuries to FBI agents, and FBI agents did not return any fire throughout the entire day, in spite of being fired upon numerous times by occupants of the compound. The following events occurred since the initial use of tear gas. These are not necessarily in chronological order. Branch Davidian Renos Abram, that's spelled A-V-R-A-A-M, was picked up by agents near the compound. He was asked about the location of the children, and he stated that the children were upstairs in the bunk area. He also was asked about how the fire was started and stated that he did not know and stated he did not know and that he heard them, referring to others in the compound, saying, "The fire has been lit. The fire has been lit." An FBI hostage rescue team member observed a subject through a window in the second floor wearing a black uniform and gas mask, undergoing a throwing motion. The person was knelt down with his hands cupped, from which a flame erupted. A man on the roof was spotted and signaled that he did not want to be rescued. This was after the fire had started. A woman in flames was seen coming out of the compound and tried to run back into the building. An FBI agent exited his armored vehicle, ran toward the building, and physically rescued the female despite her attempts to fight him off. There was no gas being inserted into the building at the time of the fire. No pyrotechnics were used at any time. Surveillance aircraft observed fire starting simultaneously at 3 separate locations. This corresponds to sightings by our snipers. A Mr. Graham Craddock was discovered at approximately 3:11 p.m. He had been bunkered near the steel water tower. When we interviewed him, he said that He heard discussions of using lantern fuel to spread it throughout the compound. He also smelled lantern fuel after it had been spread throughout the compound. The following persons have come out of the compound. This is the best information we have to date. This may change. We will give you an update tomorrow if it does change. Jaime Castillo, date of birth 6/4/68. Clive Doyle, date of birth 2/24/41. Misty Ferguson, 16 years of age. Derek Lovelock, born 8/13/1955, a citizen of the United Kingdom. David Thibodeau, born 2/13/69. Renos Abram, born 2/26/64, a citizen of the United Kingdom. Ruth Ellen Ottman Nee Riddle, born 10/24/63. There's also a black female, I did not hear the discussions earlier, who is critically wounded, unconscious, and has been hospitalized. Mr. Craddock that I mentioned is Graham Craddock. He is a citizen of Australia. That concludes my prepared remarks. Yes?
Mr. Ricks, is there any idea if David Koresh is alive at this point?
The question is, do we have any information regarding the condition of David Koresh? We have not been able to confirm whether Mr. Koresh is dead or alive. Yes, on the back row.
Given the actions of the fire and everything, do you have any regrets for using the tear gas in the M60 this morning?
The question is, do we have any regrets? We always have regrets when human life is lost. What we do not regret is that we believe that this thing had to be brought to a logical conclusion at some point. We think, ultimately, that more than likely they were preparing for an armed standoff. We believe we frustrated that efforts. We never fired one single round of ammunition. His desire, and I've stated it repeatedly, as much as I could without seeming overly dramatic, was that he wanted to have as many people killed in that compound as possible. That is why it was named the Ranch Apocalypse. All of us in the FBI, we feel very sadly for all the members of the family. This is a very tragic event. We were doing what we thought was best to try to prevent this tragedy from occurring. Yes, ma'am.
Has anyone that has come out given you any indication yet of what the mood was and what it was like in the last few hours?
Question is, have people described what the moods happened to be inside the compound and what they were the last few hours? I do not have that information. Yes, on the back row.
In the hours before the fire was set, did you have any kind of communications, either by telephone or otherwise, with anyone inside, and if so, what did they say?
Question is, what type of communication do we have inside the compound prior to the fire? Once we made the initial call shortly before 6 a.m. this morning, all communications were cut off. We had gone through a process of trying to reestablish contact inside the compound. We had never been able to reestablish that contact. Yes?
The other 80-some people who claim to be in the media, they assume dead at this point, or if not, what is known about them?
Question is, what about the other 80-some-odd people whose names were not read? We can only assume that there was a massive loss of life. It was truly an inferno of flames, as everyone observed. It would be very surprising if few, if any, of the names not read survived. Yes.
I'm sorry. What about the fate of the children that were inside? Any word on them? And then I have a follow-up.
The question is, what about the fate of the children? Again, unfortunately, we have to assume that the children probably are also dead. There was some statements early on that by people coming out that David had indicated the children had been secured in the bunkers. It appeared that this was one final lie on the part of David's part to assure some people that the children had been taken care of. It appears once again his last final act to the American public was to go through a lie. Yes.
What about, in hindsight, everything looks so much better. Would it have been better to have fire units on the scene just as a matter of course?
Question is, in hindsight, would it have been better to have fire units? I don't think so. The fire units are not equipped to withstand the gunfire that was in that compound. As you also observed, and we had, again, information, they had high-powered explosives in there. We had at least 3 major explosions that took place, perhaps even 4. I was out there for over 2.5 hours after the fire started, and the ammunition was still being cooked off. We could not roll up fire trucks to the scene while people still were inside and had the capability of shooting those people. Firemen are not paid to go through that. Yes.
Could you explain in detail how the gunfire that your agents received was life-threatening? It was our understanding that they were in the Bradleys and the tanks and so forth, but could you talk a little bit about how exactly they were threatened, by where they were and so forth?
The question is, how was the gunfire life-threatening to our agents? There are certain vulnerabilities in those vehicles, that they're not completely protected. That if you do hit certain key portions of those vehicles, you can, in fact, threaten the lives of those involved. They utilized the ultimate of restraint. They also had .50 caliber ammunition. That particularly could be damaging if it hits certain areas of vulnerability with regard to those tanks. Yes.
You said this morning, or suggested that some of the more fanatical members are holding some of the weaker members in there against their will. Can you tell us what gave you that impression, and do you think anyone was locked in there or held in there during the fire?
Question is, do we believe some of the more fanatical members held those in there? I would be speculating, but we've always suspected that to be the case. There was only one true leader in this whole operation, and that was David Koresh, who from the very beginning said that the people in there were going to be killed, and they were going to do it in an armed confrontation with law enforcement. It was to our benefit that we were able to prevent him from carrying out the second part of his prophecy, and that is that he intended to kill as many members of law enforcement as he could before his members were killed. It was to our benefit, and we're most fortunate that none of our people were injured. I believe a National Guard member did receive some injury, but none of the law enforcement members were injured. Yes, sir.
What's happening at the scene right now?
Right now at the scene, when I left, and it's been almost an hour ago, we were cooling off the scene. There was still ammunition that was being cooked. It was very difficult to go through the scene. Shortly thereafter, we will be doing a crime scene. There will be an initial sweep by the FBI to make sure there's no more booby trapping involved, to do a cursory look with regard to bodies. The crime scene will be turned over to the Texas Rangers. The FBI disaster team will also be dispatched to help in body identification. There will be an arson investigation that will also be conducted. So there will be an extensive independent crime-type scene to further determine what was the cause of the fire. It will not stop with my statements. Yes, ma'am.
I have a report that the medical examiner's office out of Dallas will come in tomorrow to start removing the bodies. But why would that take so long? 24 hours, I guess, and I have to follow up.
The question is, why would it take so long to remove the bodies? I really can't not tell you. Other than there's a tremendous amount of rubble, there's going to be a lot of clearing that's going to have to take place. It is still a crime scene, and certain things will have to be preserved. So each individual body, as I understand it, will have to be protected through the coroner's office. Following that, then the bodies themselves will be removed. Follow up. Yes, ma'am.
Obviously, this is a fulfillment of David Koresh's prophecy. As it boiled down to the very last minute, did you see any other way that this would have been resolved?
The question is, when we came down to the last, did we see any other way to have it resolved? We thought perhaps that we could stem the tide that we saw flowing here, which was ultimately leading to this catastrophic event that was taking place. We were hoping, again, as I stated this morning, by the infusion of gas into that compound, that the women in that compound would grab their children and flee out. That did not occur. Unfortunately, they bunkered down the children the best we can tell, and they allowed those children to go up in flames with them. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that a National Guard
I'm sorry, I do not. I was just told right when I came here that a National Guard member was slightly injured, and I have no description with regard to what the injuries might be. Yes, back here.
Could you in any way describe what happened inside that building in terms of all those people in there once this fire started, where they were? Do you know at all?
Question is, do we know where the building were, where the people were when the fire started. We believe that they probably, a large number were scattered throughout. What we do know, however, we believe, was probably Mr. Koresh and his leadership. There's a cinder block that was right in the middle of the compound. That cinder block was totally square, and it appears that it was protecting them from the gassing. If you recall the pictures of the CEV piercing through the door, we knew that that protection was in there. We believe we finally were able to make entry into that compound, and were able to insert gas inside that protective area. Once that protective area was injected with gas, it appears at that point the order was given to light it, to set it up in flames. So it appears that they had been able to protect themselves, and up until that point, then the decision was made to end it. Yes?
It had to have been a horrifying experience, not only for the adults, but especially the children. Do you know if there's any way that the children were put asleep, or maybe given something before this happened, or did they have to go through this agony?
The question is, do we know what happened to the children before this agony? We've had some people report that they did have poison in there. There had been previous times when people had requested that injections be given. We do not know. There were initially reports that injections were given to some of the children. As far as I can tell, and I tried to confirm that, that's total speculation. I have no information that occurred. Yes, right here.
It's been 7 weeks now. Throughout the entire process here, there's been talk about what you want to maintain, no loss of life, no injury. Where along the line did you decide you can't wait any longer, you have to go in? And did the possibility of fire enter into this? And what were the elements on the scale that finally shifted it to finally going in?
The question is, what changed on the scale? We never went in. We did not introduce fire into this compound. It was not our intention that this compound be burned down. I can't tell you the shock and the horror that all of us felt when we saw those flames coming out there. It was, oh my God, they're killing themselves. We did not want that to occur. Our desire was to get them out, to use non-lethal means in a systematic manner so that they would come before the bar and face justice. We did not want this to occur. At some point, we had to up the ante. He was continually fortifying. He was demanding and was seeking provocation to get into a shootout with us, which we were refusing to do. Yes?
Had a fire not broken out, what was the intent, what was the plan of the FBI, and how long do you think that the Davidians would have been able to stay inside?
Question is, if a fire had not broken out, how long could they have stayed inside? We believe that once we pierced that interior protective room that they had, that was fortified with a cinder block, that the time was really running out on them with regard to how long they could stay in there. We put massive gas in there. They made the decision that they could no longer maintain that environment. Their gas mask by that time had to be failing. It had been an extended period of time. They had to make the decision. Were they going to come out and face the charges? They were facing charges for killing 4 ATF agents, or were they going to commit suicide? David Koresh, we believe, gave the order to commit suicide, and they all followed willingly his orders. Yes, sir.
How many bodies have you accounted for?
Question is, how many bodies have we accounted for? Again, when we were told the children were in the buried bus area, we immediately doused that area. We went down with the fire department to try to rescue the children if they were there. We did observe several bodies. We think, however, those bodies were the bodies that were previously involved in the shootout that occurred on February the 28th. So far, there have only been sightings of a relatively small number of bodies. And again, I've only heard numbers of like 2, 3, something like this. Tremendous amount of rubble. So I don't put any real weight to that. Yes, back here.
Does your intelligence suggest to you in any way that David Koresh's response to your actions early this morning might be to set a fire? And did you have any intelligence to...
Did we have any intelligence? We had concerns early on with regard to possible suicide. We went throughout the world and interviewed former cult members, associates of former cult members. That number that I last checked was 61 people that we had talked to that had been involved with people inside that compound. The vast bulk, the substantial majority of those inside believed that they would not commit suicide. We had intelligence reports, though, however, that David Koresh, on the day he was supposed to surrender, on March the 2nd, the plan was he was going to walk out. He had grenades attached to himself. When the FBI approached him, he was going to pull the grenades and was going to kill himself. Everybody knew this was the plan. They all reconvened back in the chapel. David Koresh kissed the kids goodbye, was going to go outside, and was going to commit suicide in front of all the TV cameras. At the last second, he chickened out. We knew that suicide was a possibility because of this previous occurrence. To say that we thought at this time he was going to burn it down, we asked him on over 4 occasions, David, do you promise us that you are not going to commit suicide? I swear, I give you my word, I am not going to commit suicide. His attorneys asked him, David, is suicide a possibility? He promised them that suicide was never in the cards. Yes, sir. Follow up. Go ahead.
Is there any way in which the gas that was sent in there this morning could have, again, in any fashion, aggravated the fire, the intensity, the temperature of the fire?
The question is, could the gas have in any way intensified the fire? Absolutely not. The gas had absolutely nothing to do with the fire that occurred in that compound. We believe that it was doused with kerosene or another lantern-type fuel. It did not just come from one source. It came from multiple sources. If you saw the monitors today, what was taking place is that thing was totally in flames in a period of about 10 minutes. Yes?
Could you give us kind of a description of the primary search as you went in? Give us what it was like, kind of a scene setter, how you would describe it if you had to do it over again.
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Primary search. What's it looking like? Describe it.
Well, the question is, what does the primary search look like? We really have not, unless we've started since I left, we have not been able to conduct a primary search yet because we had so much ammunition still going off and other explosive material. I was out there and things were constantly popping off. So what we're trying to do is cool it down. It may take almost till tomorrow before we can make a true assessment of what is going on. I have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
The attorneys say that they were going to come out after they finished the manuscript. So why didn't you wait?
Question is, why did we not wait? We had information from several sources. Some of it I cannot reveal today. Some I will. Eventually it will come out, but I can say we have other sources that I can talk about that said that it was their opinion that the attorneys lied to them. Now, what that entailed, I do not know. But David Koresh said he played the game. He lied continually to the attorneys. He never intended to come out. It was all a game. Thank you.
We're still on for 10:30.
FBI spokesman Bob Ricks in Waco giving a chronology of what happened near Waco, Texas today on the Texas plain. He said, we tried to do our best to avert this tragedy. He said, we can only assume there was a massive loss of life. And he added, we have to assume the children also are dead. About David Koresh and the gunfire this morning that the agents had to face in their armored vehicles, Rick said Koresh intended to kill as many law enforcement people before killing his own people. Wolf Blitzer joins us from Washington. This news conference was begun with a statement from FBI Director William Sessions, who regretted today's incident. Wolf, do we know to what extent FBI Director William Sessions was involved in the planning of this operation?
Well, Lou, we know that the FBI, of course, was the lead agency involved in planning this operation, and Director Sessions is still the director despite some of the personal problems he's had over the past several months. We also know that Janet Reno, the Attorney General, who oversees the FBI, she had briefed President Clinton on the operational details of this planned operation on Sunday. They spent, according to officials here, about 15 minutes talking about it. The president did not object to any of these operational plans, and as a result, he implicitly gave his authorization for the entire operation. We also know that over the past 50 or so days, White House officials, other senior Clinton administration officials had hoped, indeed had put the word to officials on the scene in Waco, Texas, to try to make sure that this matter could be resolved without additional loss of life. But clearly their worst nightmare has now materialized. I will say that the White House press secretary, White House communications director, that is, George Stephanopoulos, earlier today made it clear that the president was trying to support his experts on the scene.
The FBI laid out, I mean, the Attorney General for the FBI laid out the arguments, and I can't get into all of the details of the argument. It wouldn't be appropriate to do that while the situation is still going on. But the Attorney General laid out the argument, and the President made no objection.
We're also standing by over here waiting for Janet Reno's news conference, and in fact, she is about to go forward. Janet Reno.
To avoid further loss of human lives, whether those of group members or of federal agents. We could delay the terrible tragedy of today, but with no reason to think we could eliminate the risk of mass suicide at any point Koresh chose, and with increasing risk in the meantime to the life, health, and safety to all concerned, most particularly the children within the compound. I therefore approved the plan, which had been developed by the FBI after very careful study, after discussion with people in the field, after unanimous representation from the field, that this was the best way to achieve a resolution of this matter without further loss of life. The plan was designed to induce serious negotiations or the evacuation of the compound with extremely limited risk that agents would harm any of the occupants or be harmed themselves. We announced repeatedly to those within the compound that there would be no attempt to enter the compound by federal agents. We repeatedly encouraged them to resume communications with us and were attempting to accomplish that objective when they appeared to intentionally set the compound on fire. I think the FBI acted professionally and with remarkable restraint. These are the hardest decisions in the world to make. My heart goes out to the families of the agents killed and those injured, as well as to those children and the families of those who perished in the compound today. We must all reflect on how we as a society can in the future prevent such a senseless, horrible, tragic loss of human life.
Could you talk a little bit about the authority for the operation, because the question arose because of the President's remarks. Did he approve the plan and not the timing? Did you approve the plan without his go-ahead?
I approved the plan and I'm responsible for it. I advised the President, but I did not advise him as to the details.
Did you consider in approving the plan the possibility of this outcome? And if you did, I mean, were there any particular precautions that you should or could have taken to avoid the fire?
We considered every possible potential and every possible option. We realized that we would be in the best position in this situation with everything set as it was to possibly control a mass suicide such as this. We realized that there would be other circumstances where we might not be in as much a position to take action, but we knew that in certain situations it would not be possible. We moved carefully. At first we constantly tried to shrink the perimeter around the compound. We tried to move the cars away, saw no response from them. Even bumped up against the compound with no return fire of any kind. Removed the cars yesterday with no response. Continued to move in this morning with no reaction other than to return the fire, no indication of any kind of suicide. It certainly was something that we considered because this was carefully thought out and all the risks were weighed. As I indicate, these are the hardest decisions to make.
Ms. Arena, why did you decide today to make this move? What factors went into the timing? Because for 51 days, the agents in place down there have been saying they had infinite patience. They were going to wait for as long as it took. Why move today?
We made some judgments based on the fact that experts told us that the hostage rescue team should not and could not remain in place for any permanent period of time without being relieved. We made a decision today, and there is no perfect timing, there is no perfect day, and there is no trigger, that we would increase the pressure today. But today was not meant to be D-Day or the day. We were prepared to carry it out tomorrow and the next day and do everything we could to effect a peaceful resolution of this matter. It was not today. This was just a step forward in trying to bring about a peaceful resolution by constantly exerting further pressure to shrink the perimeter.
Ms. Reno, have all of those who did survive been arrested? And if so, what will they be charged with?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the circumstances are with respect to the critically injured or the circumstances, but we will review the evidence and make the best judgment possible.
Has anyone been arrested who exited today?
I don't know. They're all in.
Ms. Reno, is there any
Did you
question?
ever consider the possibility of mass suicide, or was that not thought about?
That was the question that was asked just previously, where I indicated that we reviewed all possible options, where we had heard that there might be the possibility of that. We carefully considered that. But we came to the conclusion that based on everything that we had seen, there was nothing to prevent Koresh from doing it or prompting the people who were in the compound to do it at any time in the future. Our experts, and we talked to the experts in the field, said that they were totally frustrated that they had not been able to negotiate anything with Koresh, that they did not think that he would ever come out. We were told that he had more than adequate supplies to last an extended period of time. We had thought that perhaps we could resolve the matter by water, but the water supply continued apparently to be maintained on all the inspections that we were able to make. We felt that we had to continue to move the pressure up while we were in control with the hostage rescue team in place, so that we would, to the extent we could, realizing that there were some situations such as what happened today where we could not, if he chose to persuade or force or really persuade his followers to commit this mass suicide.
You said before that you made the judgment that the hostage rescue team should not and could not stay there without being relieved. I'm not sure I understood what you meant. Are you saying there wasn't a backup to this team that could have taken its place? And why couldn't they have stayed there for a longer period of time?
The experts advised us, advised me, and I talked with them that in those situations where you had to be constantly on the alert, that it was in the best interest of everybody concerned, including the safety of the agents and others involved, to provide for really time off. And that what I was told was that there were no backups that could ensure the safety of the perimeter. I said, why can't we extend something around the perimeter? And it was pointed out to me that they had the capacity to fire weapons over an extended period of area that could endanger the safety of those that might come onto the property during the extended period of time.
Did the FBI lose its patience?
No, I think the FBI in this situation has shown remarkable restraint. I think they did not lose their patience. I think they carefully thought this out, developed it as part of a coherent and continuing plan with the certain knowledge that in some instances these issues are the hardest decisions to make in the world. I think they made the best, most informed decision they could under the circumstances.
How long ago did they make this plan? When did they bring it to you? And when did you take it to the president?
The plan has been evolving ever since it started with the effort to gradually compress the perimeter, gradually compress the people who were in the compound into a smaller and smaller area, make it more difficult for them in the compound so that we could try to effect a negotiation that produced a peaceful resolution or that prompted the people to come out. In terms of the plan that was initiated today as part of this continuing effort, that was first submitted to me approximately a week ago.
Ms. Reno, under your plan, if you were concerned about mass suicides inside, how did you think they would respond, and what was the next step under your plan after today's events?
We were going to constantly try to compress the area through the use of gas, which I had been advised again and again. I personally talked with the doctors, was non-lethal, and would have no permanent effects on any of the residents of the compound. And we were going to just gradually increase the pressure day by day until we hoped that through negotiation or through them walking out, they would walk out. Obviously, if I thought the chances were great of a mass suicide, I would never have approved the plan. Everything that we were told, every indication of the reactions to the pressure up to that point was that that would not occur.
Thank you. Secretary Benson has been quoted as saying that the president told him his chief concern was that this situation would become a Jonestown-type mass suicide. In view of that, did he ask for, or did you give him any assurance that this would not happen?
No, because I could not give anybody assurance that this would not happen, because this has been a prospect that could have occurred ever since this happened. We had been concerned that that might be a possibility. Nothing in the future would have prevented David Koresh from doing that and leading his followers into a mass suicide. So I could not give the president that assurance, nor could I give anybody else that assurance.
Ms. Reno, can you tell us what the president said when you advised him of the plan and what his reaction has been today?
What he said when I advised him, he said, have you carefully considered it? Have you looked at everything? Do you feel like this is the best way to go? And I said, yes, sir, it's my responsibility, and I think it's the best way to go.
Have he said anything to you today about
I have not talked to him today.
Ms. Reno, what about preparations for fire, the possibility of mass suicide through fire taken into account?
What I indicated to the FBI was that we should be prepared for all eventualities, including either accidental or specifically set explosion that could cause the serious injury or death to substantial numbers in the compound.
Are you satisfied that that occurred and that the planning was as good as it could have been in that regard?
I am told that it is absolutely as good as it could have been. I obviously was not at the scene.
Senator Specter has said that the Senate Judiciary Committee may investigate this. What's your reaction to that? And in light of how events turned out, do you think that it was mishandled?
I don't think it was mishandled. I think the FBI has acted very professionally, very ably, and with remarkable restraint. In any situation in which something like this occurs, everyone has questions, and I think the best way to address this is to be as open, candid, and as forthright as possible, and I look forward to responding to anyone and everyone who has questions, because the bottom line is there are no easy answers to a question like this that was posed in this situation, and it's something that we should carefully consider with the point of view of being accountable, and I'm the one to be accountable, and two, what do we do in the future to prevent such a senseless loss of human life?
Ms. Reno, in the 1 week that you had this matter under consideration, did you direct that there be any changes made in the plan? Did you ask that something be done differently?
I asked question after question. I met with experts. I talked with as many people as possible, asked questions, and essentially the plan was exactly as it had been presented to me. I think the FBI very, very carefully thought it out. They talked to medical experts. They talked to others, and everything we did to review their careful planning indicated that they had planned it very carefully.
What was Plan B? What would have happened if the gassing today had not brought them out, but they had not set a fire? What was going to happen tomorrow?
We were going to wait and continue to increase the pressure and be as patient as we could.
Ms. Reno,
given his fascination for fire that he had mentioned in other letters and talked about, and obviously those sort of things in the Bible that he's made reference to, what was the contingency plan in case of a fire? I mean, surely that was among the range of options you considered.
My understanding was that fire engines were available. They could not be immediately available to the compound because you had The 50 caliber ammunition that was capable, I was told at the time, and had subsequently been confirmed, could fire up to 3,000 yards.
So there was really no way to stop a fire then?
I don't see how you could get a machine, a vehicle that close to the compound. Again, I don't profess to be the expert, but in terms of all the inquiries that I made concerning what we understood to be the ammunition and the capability in that compound, I think they did everything they could to be as prepared as they could.
Does that include airborne firefighting equipment, such as helicopters and fire types?
You have, again, the problem of sending a helicopter in with a 50 caliber bullet right there. I think, again, in terms of trying to protect the agents, they did everything that they could.
Are you concerned that there was a 10-minute delay, at least, between the time the flames first appeared and when the Waco Fire Department said that they received a call for assistance from the...
I'm not aware of that. We will certainly check into that.
Ms. Reno, since you said it was your responsibility to go ahead with this operation, what was your reaction, your thoughts today when you saw the compound burst into flames?
I think it's an extraordinarily tragic and horrible situation.
Ms. Reno? But did you start to second-guess yourself, think perhaps this wasn't the right decision?
One of the things that one does in this position is make the best judgment they can based on all the information that they have, take that judgment and move ahead with the understanding that I'm the person that's accountable, I'm the person that answers the questions. I always welcome reviews. If there are ways to do it better for the future, I welcome consideration of all of those.
Do you have any intelligence report as far as where the children were and what efforts were made to get them out?
We had, that's one of the first questions that we asked when the plan was submitted. What have we done to see if we could get the children out? We talked to the negotiators. We had tried to negotiate the children out, I was told, and we had been totally unable to persuade him to send the children out. We were told that they were in a certain area. We tried not to gas that area immediately.
Mr. Reno, is there any doubt in your mind? We've heard the evidence that Special Agent Ricks indicated why he thinks the fire was set from inside. Is it at this point, is there any doubt in your mind or the Justice Department's mind that the fire was set by the cult members?
I have absolutely no doubt at all that the cult members set it based on all the information that has been furnished to me.
Ms. Reno, were you presented with a set of options from which you chose one, or were you just presented with one plan? And also, did you present the president with just one or a set of options?
We were presented with a range of options, which was to do nothing, to pull back, to build walls, to go in, there were a variety of options. We considered each one, discussed it, analyzed it, thought about it, and kept coming back to the plan that had ultimately been concluded by the Bureau was the best plan on which to proceed.
And did you also present the president with just this final plan?
I presented him, I told him in general terms what the alternatives were.
Has David Corse's death been confirmed?
When I came down here, it had not been confirmed.
General, there appears to be what looks like a studied effort to distance President Clinton from this action. The suggestion that you are accountable, that this is a department operation, is that an intentional effort on your part or on the part of the White House spin doctors to make this look like your problem and not Mr. Clinton's?
I made the decision. I'm accountable. The buck stops with me, and nobody ever accused me of running from a decision that I made based on the best information that I had. I don't do spin stuff, and I'm not distancing anybody from anything. I'm telling you exactly what happened.
My only suggestion was that Mr. Clinton sought and obtained the office, and he is the head of the executive branch. Is this not his problem also, even if you are his agent in this operation?
I think President Clinton probably feels as bad as I do about what happened, and I think he feels as I do.
Well, Ms. Reno, you said at the beginning that we should all reflect how we as a society can prevent such a senseless loss of human life in the future. What kind of reflections will you make? What do you have in mind?
I will analyze everything. I will look back to it. I will ask that we further review what can be done in other situations. I will look at what information is available in terms of other groups that might do something like this. I will carefully consider everything for the future and review it based on what was done here.
Reno, who were you dealing with at the FBI, and when did you last speak with them?
I have talked with Director Sessions, with Floyd Clark, with Larry Potts, with Doug Dow, and there are other people whose names I do not know.
In a strategy of constantly compressing the pressure and everything, how did you understand driving a tank up to a place and punching a hole in it and throwing tear gas bombs fit?
It fit in terms of what had been done up till that date of restraining people from leaving the compound to work around the area. We looked at what was the least intrusive measure possible of further limiting the compound. We talked to doctors who told us that the tear gas was not lethal, that there would not be permanent injury. I personally talked to the doctors. I talked to people who had been gassed themselves. I looked at what could be done and how the gas should best be inserted into the building. I looked at what had been done up until that point with the tank clearing cars away from the building and coming up to the building, and I made a decision that that would be the least intrusive manner possible of trying to resolve this matter without a frontal assault, without the FBI having to return fire.
Ms. Reno, you mentioned that you told the president what the options were. Did he indicate a preference, or did you say we have options 1 through 6, but we're going with number 1?
No, I told him generally what the options were. I told him that I had carefully studied it, reviewed it in detail, and that I felt that this was the best way to proceed.
When did you do this?
And he was in agreement.
He said, okay.
When did he give the okay? When did he actually give the okay?
I don't know whether he gave an okay or not. His statement to me was, well, okay.
And when was that?
I do not remember.
Over the weekend?
Over the weekend.
Have you had enough, or would you like to
Oh,
a few
I'm
more?
trying to...
Ask you about the D.C. Stalker case, your reaction to the arrest today?
I have not really had a chance to review the details on it, and I think it would be inappropriate of me to comment without being more fully informed.
Back on.
You committed the FBI's handling of this. Does that constitute an endorsement of Director Sessions, and what's his future now that this is over?
As I have told you on numerous occasions, this Waco is an entirely separate matter from that. I am reviewing that matter and will make a recommendation to the President as soon as I can, consistent with a thorough, objective, and fair review.
Ms. Reno, did the FBI, in discussing this plan with you, cite any precedent? Did they say this kind of thing has worked in the past? Is this standard practice?
I don't think we've ever had a situation really like this before.
I may be thick, but I really don't quite understand why you couldn't rotate people on this shift. I didn't really understand your answer to that. Why the simple fatigue of this team meant that you had to do something right now.
It was not simple fatigue, it was retraining, and what we were told was that there were no other groups as equipped to go in to maintain that perimeter, to protect the perimeter over a long period of time. Thus, we made a decision that we could delay it for 3 weeks, possibly send the people out, but this was the best time in terms of the control we had, knowing that it was not perfect control, because we could not tell over a 6-month period or a year period just what would happen. And we were advised that they had supplies sufficient to carry them on indefinitely. I asked exactly the same question, and at first I thought I didn't understand, but I talked with the experts, I talked with the head of the team, and I felt that this would be, considering everything else, the best time we could possibly begin to increase the pressure in the fashion that we did.
How long would it have taken to train a replacement team?
I don't know.
How many people?
Roughly 6 months, a year? Or?
I don't know.
Do you know how many people are on the team?
No, I don't.
Would you have done anything differently in hindsight?
As I said in response to the same question over there, what I do in all these situations is make the best judgment I can. I try to ask all the questions I can possibly think of. I try to consider every eventuality I possibly can. And then I try to make the best judgment I can based on all the information available. After that, I expect to be accountable for my decisions. And I expect to have my decisions reviewed, and I expect to look at them myself and try to see whether there is anything that can be done to prevent such a loss of human life in the future.
Based on the intelligence you've received, do you believe that there are any other groups or cults in the country right now that are capable of the behavior of the branch division?
I have not received any such information, but I have not exhaustively, I have not received the information.
Were there any other factors that were bringing particular urgency to acting right away, such as any information or intelligence that the children were being abused, or that there was any other, that there was any plans for any mass suicide or action by Koresh, proactive action by Koresh?
I think that's what, and I apologize, because I think that's what has to be put in perspective, in the sense that this was a cause for the first effort to go into the compound, the reports that children were being sexually abused, and that subsequently we received information that infants were being slapped around and beaten. Under those circumstances, it was our earnest hope that we could try to negotiate without endangering human life, to get these children out as soon as possible. It comes 51 days. The sanitation in the building is deteriorating. We're hearing information concerning problems in disposing of human waste. We don't know what the circumstances are with the children. We don't know how long it's going to go on. We are told that it could go on indefinitely, and we have to make the best judgment we can as to what is in the best interest, particularly of those children. Again, it is one of the hardest decisions that anybody could make.
But did you have information that the children were being beaten during the time the siege was going on?
We had information, and I'm not sure the timing of the information, as that the babies were being beaten. I specifically asked, you really mean babies? Yes, that he's slapping the babies around. Again, this is information that is furnished, but these are the concerns we had.
How did you weigh the possibility that putting pressure on these people would increase the chances of this kind of mass suicide?
We carefully considered it. We looked at what they had done. We knew that it might be a possibility, that it might be a possibility today, that it could be a possibility next week if we withdrew and left him to his own devices, that it could be a possibility for the future. And we made the best judgment we could with all the facts that we had as to what the most appropriate time to try to do something would be.
But you still considered it highly unlikely?
We considered it highly unlikely. Obviously, if we had considered it likely, that would have been a different situation.
Since Koresh had repeatedly lied to negotiators and broken promises time and again, including recently the idea of producing, whatever manuscript he was going to work on, you really, in effect, given up on the idea of human one-on-one or team negotiation with him?
One of the things that we did was talk directly to the negotiators, who said they had not been able to successfully negotiate with him, and they did not think that they could be successful in the future, and that they did not think he would come out.
You said you considered suicide a possibility if you withdrew and left Koresh to his own devices. Was that ever an option, seriously under consideration, to just move out of Waco?
No, certainly not, because these people were here. They had killed 4 agents. They had wounded others. When I say left to his own devices, just with a general perimeter around. But one of the things that countered against that was the fact that it would be very difficult to secure that perimeter at a distance far enough from the compound not to make the people securing that perimeter exposed to the fire, particularly from the .50 caliber.
Mr. May I pick up on Nina Totenberg's question again here for a moment?
Was this the first time that the FBI had recommended increasing the pressure a week ago?
They have come to us saying that they were gradually increasing the pressure. They got the cars out from around the compound, then they put concertina wire around the compound, and they kept us advised before they were going to do each step. So that this was a step, one of gradual steps to increase the pressure on the compound with the hope of getting the people to come out peacefully.
But nothing before being this dramatic.
No.
Would you label this?
Is there a weakness, do you think, in the law enforcement system when there's only one hostage team that needed to be replaced and you did not have trained people?
This would certainly be one of the issues that we considered.
In what way will you address that?
By addressing whether there should be other resources available in situations such as this.
Do you believe there should be?
I don't know.
You mentioned that team and also perimeter security, was that a team that was specially trained to go in and rescue hostages, or was it a team that was intended to stay back and protect the perimeter?
It could do both, as I understood it, but you should talk with them about the details of what it was specifically trained to do.
These folks have to file sooner or later. Is that enough?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we've heard from Attorney General Janet Reno telling us exactly what went through her mind in authorizing what she now says was a horribly tragic and sad situation, this operation that did not succeed today in Waco, Texas. She said it was the thought of experts that a mass suicide would be highly unlikely, but that's apparently what she says did in fact occur. There will be a lot of second guessing in the days ahead and probably in the weeks and years ahead over what exactly happened today in Waco, Texas. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
The FBI, Wolf, had some official reaction within the past hour in a press conference. Special Agent Bob Bricks made this statement.
We can only assume that there was a massive loss of life. It was truly an inferno of flames, as everyone observed. It would be very surprising if few, if any, of the names not read survived.
And then Bob Bricks talked about a suicide plan that Koresh had reportedly devised.
We had intelligence reports, though, however, that David Koresh, on the day he was supposed to surrender, on March the 2nd, the plan was he was going to walk out. He had grenades attached to himself. When the FBI approached him, he was going to pull the grenades and was going to kill himself. Everybody knew this was the plan. They all reconvened back in the chapel. David Koresh kissed the kids goodbye, was going to go outside, and was going to commit suicide in front of all the TV cameras. At the last second, he chickened out.
And so the tactical part of the maneuver by the FBI at the Waco, Texas Branch Davidian compound is over. 9 people have survived, 6 men and 3 women, one of those women in critical condition. The others all have died, according to the reports we're getting from the Justice Department. So fortuitously named Ranch Apocalypse has been destroyed. The story will go on, as Wolf Blitzer said, for days, weeks, perhaps years ahead. I'm Lou Waters at CNN Center with Cheryl Atkinson. World Today is next here on CNN.
So we're looking, right, we're talking about